Monday afternoon. Welcome to 580 Sports Talk. Brendan Willinsky, Dan Lucero here with you.
3 hours. 580 Sports Talk today. Boatload to get to from a busy weekend. The Kansas State Wildcats landed one of the biggest fish in the transfer portal pond this weekend. The Kansas City Royals have sunk almost to the bottom of their Major League Baseball pond as well. We've got a lot of maritime wordplay to get to, and we've got a lot of stuff to get to. No, I've actually exhausted all of it.
I think we might be out of it. I think that might have been the extent.
We've burned through the entire glut of maritime jokes. But we're happy you are here with us today. We do indeed have a very busy show coming your way. We would love for you to be a part of it. The text line is open, 785-272-9429 is the text line number. YouTube comment section also open. You can come watch the video live stream of the show on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, search Sports on 580. We will be the first result. Click on our channel, subscribe, and then you can watch the live stream and comment in the comment section as well. In this opening hour of the show, we will talk about your Kansas City Royals, who are now a whopping 2.5 games out of last place in the majors. All of Major League Baseball. They are 2.5 games up on the Oakland A's. That's it.
So 2 weeks ago, on a whim, we decided, hey, let's poke a little fun at the Oakland Athletics because they look like they might end up being the worst baseball team of all time. They are pacing to be the worst baseball team of all time. Let's have a little fun with that in our headline segment. Let's start a watch, we called it. And 2 weeks later, the joke's not funny anymore because they only have one fewer win than the Kansas City Royals.
It is alarming how much better the A's are playing right now than the Royals have at any point this season. The A's have won 5 games in a row.
Yes, they have. The Royals have the Royals won 3 in a row yet? I don't believe they have.
No, they've won 2 in a row a couple of times. Yeah. And that's it. The A's, in fact,
they swept a division leader over the weekend.
They've won 3 of their last 4 series. They got swept by the Marlins in there, but still. It is getting worse and worse for the Kansas City Royals. They did make a roster move today. Will it change much? Probably not. But we will get to that. We'll get to a miserable weekend for the Kansas City Royals as well coming up here in just a minute. Also, in this opening hour, we will play a little Good, Bad, and Ugly. We recap the entire sports weekend. And we'll talk to Matt Verderame from Sports Illustrated on the Plumbing Place Wine and Spirits hotline for our weekly conversation about all things NFL. We'll get to Arthur Kaluma today, the newest Kansas State Wildcat. That was big news that broke over the weekend. That's huge for Kansas State. They have legitimately now a nailed-on, confirmed, second high major player who you know is going to make an instant impact. You got Tyler Perry, who I still think is a huge addition for this team at the point guard spot, or even at the off-guard 2 spot. All of a sudden, that one player, I think, changes the ceiling completely for Kansas State. We'll talk about that coming up in the 4 o'clock hour today. We'll round up what's going on around NFL minicamp. We heard Matt Derrick on with Jake and Fulton during Mic'd Up today. We've got headlines from around the NFL first day of minicamps. Plus, we've got today's 580 Sports Talk headlines. We'll preview Reds Royals tonight. It's been a big weekend and a big Monday for KU football recruiting. Big K-State basketball news and big KU football news over the weekend. How about that? It's like backwards roll over the last couple of days. Plus, we'll get to our playoff roundup. We might have a new NBA champion today, Dan.
We might.
Are you more excited or more worried?
I mean, I have a feeling Denver's going to find a way to win one of the next 3 games. Let me just say, it's one of those. I'm so excited that I'm sick to my stomach.
I get it.
The possibility that it could happen tonight is so tantalizing that the thought of it not going well, even just the barest thought of it, makes me absolutely nauseous. I am looking forward to talking about other things for the next 3 hours. Hopefully they'll fly by because I'm just a wreck all day today thinking about Game 5 of the NBA Finals.
When's tip tonight? 7:30?
7:30-ish. You know, they
7:45.
Yeah.
All right. So you got just about 4.5 hours.
They could have played it yesterday. Nobody was doing nothing.
Why not play it now?
Yeah. Arena's not booked. Let's go tip it up.
Sure. Paint the decals on the court. They're good to go. Why not just jump in and play right now?
Again, we're taking your text and YouTube comments throughout the show today. YouTube channel called Sports on 580 WWW, and the text line number is 785-272-9429. We start today, though, with the Kansas City Royals, who finished their road trip, their 6-game dad's road trip, with a whopping 0 wins and 6 losses. They have now been swept 7 times this season. It is June 12th. We are not halfway through month number 3 of the season, not even 2.5 months in, and the Kansas City Royals have already been swept 7 times. Here's a few stats for you from this road trip against Miami and against Baltimore, this East Coast swing. 6 games, they lose all of them. They averaged 2.3 runs a game. They gave up 6.8 runs per game. That is an average run differential, Dan, of 4.5 runs per game. 3 times they lost by an exact score of 6-1. 1 time they scored more than 3 runs in a game. 6 games. They broke 3 runs 1 time, and they lost that game by, guess what, 3 runs. That is how bad this road trip was for the Royals. Here's some stats for you during just this month, since June 1st, well, June 2nd, they didn't play on the 1st. Since June 2nd, Nick Pratto has an on-base percentage of .286. That is terrible. Michael Massey is hitting a whopping .080 for the month. He is 2 for 25. Bob Witt had 2 hits yesterday. He has been terrible over the course of the month in general. MJ Melendez has amazingly been one of the best offensive players on the team over the last 12 days, 11 days, whatever. And he went 0 for 4 yesterday. And by the way, Vinny Pasquantino, who has been the brightest star of any of the young guys recently, is on the injured list with a shoulder injury that he has now suffered 2 seasons in a row.
It's bleak, man. Like that was the bleakest week of Royals baseball, I think, this season.
Easily.
I mean, there's competition, ample competition for that title, but that was a bleak week. There's just nothing you can take from this last week. It got so bleak. Ryan O'Hearn went 3 for 3 with a dinger against the Royals yesterday. I mean, you want to talk about injury meet insult. He get tuned up by Ryan O'Hearn and just bludgeoned to death by that Orioles team. We talked about what has happened on Friday's show, what has happened since both of these teams finished the 2021 season as losers, but it looked like the Royals might be a little further ahead, and the Orioles, they look like a laughingstock. And in the 2 years since, we talked about how, well, the year and change since, that the Orioles have gone in one direction while the Royals have backslid. And we got to see over the weekend, again, just how big that gulf in class is right now between the Baltimore Orioles and the Kansas City Royals. It is rather staggering. And it's a gulf in class for a lot of reasons. It's not just any one thing. The Royals can't pitch. They're not a good defensive team. And you could argue their best defensive player, they just DFA'd him today. And they were justified in doing so because he had an OPS, not an on-base percentage, not a slugging percentage, an OPS, an on-base plus slugging of .397. Talking about Jackie Bradley Jr., he was DFA'd today. He was their best defensive outfielder, and maybe their best defensive player all around. They can't catch the ball. They can't throw the ball. They can't pitch the ball. They can't hit the ball. The offense has gone in the total wrong direction. We talked early in the season about the batted ball data for the Royals and actually being kind of promising early in the year, even when the Royals weren't scoring runs. Like, hey, they're still hitting the ball hard. They're still hitting the ball hard pretty often. You could expect that there could be some better results for this team offensively. And then for about a 20-odd game stretch, there were better results with the same kind of batted ball data. The last time we checked in on that was May 11th. Since May 12th, 26 games ago, exactly 1 month ago, the Royals, after ranking 3rd in baseball in exit velocity, 3rd in baseball in hard hit percentage.
All good things.
Up to that point, their first 39 games. In their last 26 games, they are 20th in exit velocity and 16th in hard hit percentage. So they have stopped hitting the ball hard. They've stopped hitting the ball far. They never were making all that much contact in the first place, which is part of the problem. There's nothing good here.
No.
There's nothing positive. There's no thread we can pull on and say, hey, here's something you might like. No, I got nothing like that for you today. There's nothing remotely close to like that after that week of baseball.
And I think what makes this last week especially painful is it was just insult added to injury repeatedly, one after the other, game after game. Like Miami, nobody cares about the Marlins. Absolutely nobody in the greater baseball landscape cares about the Miami Marlins. And yet they have very quietly, despite their best pitcher from a year ago, the guy who won the Cy Young, being probably the biggest victim of anybody to the pitch clock this year, that now that he has to work faster, he is suddenly not very good anymore. Now, I think that is going to change eventually. But despite their best pitcher suddenly becoming very mediocre this season, they have a winning record. And they smacked the Royals around. They had an advantage in the final 2 games of that series of 12-2. They outscored the Royals 21-8 in 3 games. They just walloped them on the road. One team that doesn't draw good crowds just destroying another team that doesn't draw good crowds. Then let's move to this series against Baltimore, shall we? Where not only did you have the storyline we talked about on Friday going into the weekend, we did a whole segment. Why have the Orioles taken off in just 2 years' time, less than 2 years' time, while the Royals have done nothing but dig themselves deeper into this rebuild hole? When you talk about superstars, you got to see Adley Rutschman this weekend, among others, for that Baltimore team, these young contributing players. Then you look at a guy, you brought him up, like Ryan O'Hearn. And Christopher mentions this in the YouTube comments. I saw this stat as well. Ryan O'Hearn had 7 plate appearances this weekend for the Orioles against the Royals. Do you know how many times he reached base?
All 7 of them.
All 7 of them. Ryan O'Hearn, you want to have some fun with statistics? Ryan O'Hearn this year is batting .328. His on-base percentage is .380. His slug is .609. That is an OPS of .990. And now, granted, is that going to regress to the mean?
Of course.
Yes. But, you look at his batting average on balls in play. It's well above average, but it's not quite Nick Pratto with a .520 BABIP. It's .386. That's closer to being... that's a really good year as opposed to that is impossible to keep up.
Ryan O'Hearn, very grateful that the shift no longer exists.
Oh, big time. He is, according to Baseball Reference, his wins above replacement number is 0.7. 0.7 wins above replacement. His career high up to this point was in 2018, his first year with the Royals. Remember that year? Remember that weird year where all of a sudden it looked like he was going to be a star?
Mm-hmm.
He was at 0.8. He had 99 more plate appearances that year than he does so far this year. Every other year of his career, he has been worth negative wins above replacement. He's killing it this year. That is what. And I'm not trying to say the Royals should have kept him because that experiment failed. Honestly, that experiment had failed by the middle of the COVID season and just continued to get worse. I'm not saying, oh man, the Royals cut bait too early. No, I'm not. That's dumb. But this is another example of a guy who left the Royals and immediately is doing more than he did in the past 5 years with the Royals. You know who else popped up today? I saw this on Twitter. Remember Emmanuel Rivera?
Yeah.
Emmanuel Rivera right now is playing for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Uh-huh.
Former Royal. He spent about a year and a half with the Royals. Well, he spent a grand total of 91 games with the Royals. 92 games, excuse me. This year with Arizona, sitting .356. He's got an OPS plus of 138. I know that's a lot of numbers for you. If they sound really high, that's because they are. It's just infuriating. And I know this isn't all the guys who are leading the team right now. I understand that. And I think almost every critique about this Royals team comes with the caveat. JJ Piccolo did not have full control of the roster last year or any year prior to that. Matt Quatraro took this job because he wanted to be a manager. But, there's very little you can point to Quatraro and say, wow, this is a failing on your part for this year. And the cupboard is not exactly full for the newest Royals manager, right?
Yeah, I don't put a lot of this on him. And it's tempting. it's tempting to ascribe blame to the manager, especially a first-year manager that the fans haven't had a chance to warm to or anything like that. But
yeah.
I bring John McGraw back from the dead, and he's not taking this team to the playoffs.
It just stinks. It is. I don't want to say it is rotten to the core because I think that is overboard. But
it might be.
They can't hit, they can't pitch, they can't field, and they can't even run the bases anymore. Now, granted, today they made a roster move. We talked about that. JBJ, out of here. He's DFA'd, and they bring up Dairon Blanco, who was with the Royals for barely like a sip of coffee last year. This year, sitting over 300 at AAA Omaha.
Yeah.
He has stolen 47 bases. That is the best in all of minor league baseball. Any level, low A, high A, double, triple, complex league, all of it.
And that sounds kind of fun in theory. All right, here's a guy, not much major league experience, but he's tearing up AAA. Let's give him a chance. Let's call him up. Let's plug him in the lineup. Let the kids play, right? Dairon Blanco is 30 years old, man.
Yep.
He's 30 years old. This is not like the tempting thing to do.
He's closer to being Dennis Quaid in The Rookie than he is actually being one of these young guys.
Bro, he's older than you.
Yeah, he is. He is older than me.
So like at the very least, when the Royals last year were bringing up Melendez and bringing up Prado and bringing up Pasquantino, I was like, okay, hey, these guys are top 100 prospects. These guys have a legitimate chance of being good major leaguers, and we get to start to see them put one foot in front of the other, and maybe that'll improve the big league product. There's nobody like that right now. The Royals have 0 top 100 prospects. Like, the cavalry is not coming. The cavalry is here, and this is what it looks like. That's the thing that's so disheartening. The cavalry's not coming. It's here. Witt and Pasquantino, even though I know now he's on the injured list, and Melendez and Prado, that's the cavalry. And this is what you've got around it. Because, I mean, Prado's not having a bad year. He's still striking out way too much, and the power's not coming along. And I'm a little concerned about that in the long haul. But he's been one of the more productive hitters on the Royals this season. Still think Bobby Witt Jr.'s got some ceiling. Still think MJ Melendez has some ceiling. Vinny's hurt, but he was having a fine year before he got hurt. So it's not like their fault. You don't look at these guys and say, oh, man, all these guys are busts or whatever it is. It's just, this is what you've assembled around this group. It's this bad. It's revoltingly bad. And, like, even again, some of the guys you were thinking were going to be cornerstone players. Brady Singer, I turned on the TV yesterday to watch the Royals. Brady Singer had 41 pitches already in his start. Was that yesterday or was that the day before?
They all blend together. I think that was yesterday.
I think yesterday he started.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
They do. I mean, was it the loss on Saturday or was it the loss? No, because yesterday was the opener. It was Saturday.
Okay.
It was Saturday. Yeah, I turn on the TV. He's got 41 pitches in the second inning. Like, all of a sudden, he's pitching like a guy who's a fringe major leaguer. And that's the guy who's supposed to anchor your rotation. The bullpen, we talked a lot, like, not long ago. Hey, the bullpen's been kind of a plus. These guys are throwing the ball well. You worry about them getting overtaxed because none of your starters can give you more than 5 innings. And now, here we are. Carlos Hernandez's ERA is over 5. Scott Barlow's ERA is over 4. Mike Myers has come back down to earth. I think we can say that definitively at this point. Jackson Kowar gave up one of the longest home runs I've ever seen in my life to Gunnar Henderson yesterday.
That feels like home. Feels good to be back.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, it blows.
It's so unpleasant. And, like, it does sort of feel like the way that they have juggled the Omaha roster today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were 3 guys got called up to AAA Omaha. There were 2 guys that the Royals have signed to minor league contracts today. It feels like if you're bringing players to Omaha, you got to be sending some of the players who are on that roster somewhere else. And I haven't heard about like a measles outbreak in that clubhouse or anything. So the suspicion would be that some of those guys are going to get called up and maybe get some looks. Man, it's not the cavalry. It's just, it's new faces. It's new names. It's going to be the same results. Like, there's nobody coming who's going to lift the Royals out of this malaise. This is what it is. And this is what it's going to be the rest of this season at the very least. And there's no quick fix. There's no thinking, man, they could turn the corner, and they've been hitting the ball hard, just been a little unlucky. No, they stopped even doing that. Well, the one thing you could hang your hat on the first 40 games of the year, and they've quit doing it.
The Royals will play the Reds starting tonight. 7:15 first pitch, 7:10 first pitch at the K. You'll hear the game right here on 580 WIBW.
Speaking of teams that were in the toilet, like last year, the Reds, a laughingstock. Yeah, the owners telling the fans, hey, yeah, this team's going to stink. But what else are you going to do, huh? We're the only ball game in town, you suckers. And now they're back filling up the ballpark for a team that's 4 games out of first place because their young players have been super exciting. They're getting behind Ellie De La Cruz. And let me tell you, if there's a visiting player worth the price of admission at the K this week, it might be that dude.
The other guy, what's his name? Benson.
Will Benson.
Is it Will Benson?
Yeah, he got a 599 OPS. He's not that exciting. You're thinking of Matt McLean, who's red hot.
McLean came out. Well, but Benson's been hitting better. I saw him in
one of his walk-off against the Dodgers.
The other day.
And he's only 25, another young guy.
He and De La Cruz hit their first career home runs on the same day. I saw Benson in one of his first games. It was like his 10th game in the majors. They played the Cubs when I was up there in Chicago. Since then, he has actually been hitting really well. He has multiple multi-hit games since then, including a win over St. Louis yesterday. So the Reds are red hot. The one thing that's nice for the Royals is they try to avoid the basement of all of Major League Baseball. The A's get to play the Rays the next 3 days. I know the A's have won 5 in a row. I would take the Rays in every game in that series. And Vegas would too, by the way, in case you're a baseball bettor.
Couple of Royals texts from the text line. One from the 785. Much as I hate bunting, I think the Royals should try to bunt every batter for an entire game. It can't get any worse, and it might be better to watch. And we got a couple of facepalm emojis with that one. Also from the 785, I joked yesterday the Royals must have stopped paying the Kowar imposter, so the real one had to pitch. Yeah, there had been a couple of promising relief outings. Yeah. And then Gunnar Henderson hit that ball to Saturn last night.
I believe I read that was the furthest hit ball ever at Camden Yards, or the furthest one out of right field.
That might be right.
There was something about where it hit the building, the warehouse. Yeah, it
one hopped that warehouse, which the only person who ever hit that ball on the fly is Ken Griffey Jr. in the home run derby. Never happened in a game. That warehouse pretty far back.
Yeah, I believe that was it. That it was the first one to ever one hop the warehouse. Just a miserable week of baseball. And I'm going to be honest with you, Ellie De La Cruz has a chance to put up some gaudy exit velocity and launch distances this weekend against Royals pitching. Goodness gracious. We do have Royals baseball, again, coming up tonight against the Reds, first game of the series. We'll preview that matchup coming up a little bit later on. Old friend for the Royals will be on the mound tonight for the Reds.
Luke Weaver, the guy they traded to get when they traded away the aforementioned Emmanuel Rivera, as our segment comes full circle.
He's not very good. Maybe.
No, he's not.
I'm not even going to say maybe it'll happen tonight. Once the Royals finally win a game, we can celebrate a Royals win at that point. I'm not predicting one up until that point, though. We have to get to a break. Matt Verderame will join us later on this hour to talk all things NFL. But first, it's time to recap the weekend with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Next on 580 Sports Talk. It was a busy weekend in the sports world, and that means it's time for us to recap it on this Monday edition of 580 Sports Talk. It's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. My good from the weekend, I want to give a shout out to my guy, Kyle Hendricks, who missed a lot of the last 2 seasons due to injury. He actually talked about it on one of the Cubs broadcasts the other day, how long it took him to get back because he elected not to have surgery, which may have even kept him out even longer. Arduous process for him to get back. He is the last member of the 2016 World Series champion Cubs to remain on the Cubs roster. 7 2/3 innings, no-hit baseball on Saturday night. Gave up a rocket single off the left field wall to who ended up hitting that? Was it Jock Peterson who hit that for the Giants? Doesn't really matter. 8 innings, 1 hit. Kyle Hendricks is back, and it is awesome. Very, very likable guy. He's been solid for a long time. Always love a good comeback story, and after more than a year out of baseball, was happy for that for my guy.
You know, the thing I enjoy about Hendricks is what an anachronism he is in the modern game, where everything is faster and everything moves more, and you got to have the big 95-mile-an-hour fastball and the huge sweeper. And nah, man, he just goes out there with 88 and hits the spots and changes speeds and he pitches. It's the craft of pitching that Kyle Hendricks has always practiced that I appreciate. So it was cool to see him have a game like that, have that moment.
It was also cool because he called his own game, the whole game. He was working with rookie catcher Miguel Amaya. It was just the second time they've ever worked together. The last time out, it did not go well, and Hendricks shook him off all game long. This time, they worked it out as the game went on, and Hendricks called his own game with the pitch comm, and then went 7 2/3 no hit. It was awesome.
My good for me, I mentioned this on Friday's show, but yesterday, Sunday, was my 1-year anniversary.
Yeah.
And my wife and I celebrated. Went out to dinner. You know the Cyrus Hotel downtown Topeka. That's where we stayed the night of our wedding. So where we put up all our guests. So we ate at the restaurant there, the Weather Room. Took her to dinner there, and we had a nice time. We really nice meal, really tasty meal, and got to enjoy celebrating 1 year of marriage. That was easily the best thing that happened on my weekend.
That's awesome. That is wonderful. Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
My bad is the Royals. They suck. They're awful. They're not fun to watch. They don't really have anything really brightening up the future at this point. It's just bleak and it sucks, and they're no fun.
Yeah, they aren't. There's not much to say about them other than that. My bad is the security guard who planted professional golfer Adam Hadwin on the 18th green at the end of the RBC Canadian Open yesterday. If you missed it, and you might have, it was a heck of a golf tournament for drama's sake, as Canadian Nick Taylor became the first Canadian to win the Canadian Open since 1954. It had been a long time since the native son had won the National Open of Canada, and he did it in 4 playoff holes against the Englishman, Tommy Fleetwood, and did it by making a 72-foot eagle putt on the 18th green on the 4th playoff hole. It was awesome. Absolute scenes. Jim Nantz nailed the call. It really, really cool to see. And in the aftermath, several Canadian golfers wanted to celebrate the win. Mike Weir, former Masters champion, was there. There were a couple other guys. I think Corey Connors hung around. Adam Hadwin, who's really good buddies with Nick Taylor, a Canadian who, to give you a local angle on Adam, met his wife on Tinder at the Air Capital Classic in Wichita. His wife, Jessica, is from Derby, I think. So there's a bit of a local angle to Adam Hadwin. Yeah, he came out with a champagne bottle. He's going to spray his buddy with champagne. And a security guy saw him and said, "No, you don't." Planted him like prime Ray Lewis. Put Adam Hadwin in the dirt. Thankfully, the identity was quickly resolved. And as Adam's wife put it on Twitter, my husband is so Canadian that he apologized to the security guard for causing a problem. He is fine. Hadwin is, and he'll compete in the U.S. Open this weekend.
That's pretty funny.
It was so funny. I've watched the clip like 20 times from a bunch of different angles. Cracks me up every single time. That security guard was on his P's and Q's, man. He saw somebody coming for the winning golfer. He said, "Oh, no, you don't."
I mean, you got to give the guy credit, right? I mean, he did his job really well.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, he was on his toes. Perfectly executed form tackle and everything.
I wouldn't know what Adam Hadwin looked like either, to be honest with you.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, if anybody at a golf event is going to know what Adam Hadwin looks like, it should be the one in his home country, right?
That's true.
You would
think.
think.
That's a fair point. That's a very fair point. Ugly for me, the ending of Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final this weekend. Yikes! Fight breaks out right at the very end. Florida. I didn't really know much about Matthew Tkachuk going into the Stanley Cup final, to be honest with you. Good player. Ooh, man, it is amazing he does not get in a lot more trouble because, wow, he is dirty. Holy cow. He was freaking choking a dude out from the back with his stick after the game.
He is what they call there's a 4-letter word I can't say, disturber. That's what he is. He is a bleep disturber.
Yeah, it was ugly. Fans throwing trash on the ice. It just gross. Bad look for Florida fans. Bad look for the Florida team. They're done. It cooked. They look like posers. They look like children. They're done. Don't even play Game 5. That series is over.
My ugly is the Kansas City Royals. You were too nice to them by only making them your bad. That was an appalling week and a truly disgusting weekend of baseball. I don't know where it goes from here. It is extremely grim, extremely bleak, and Dairon Blanco is not your savior.
No, that is certainly the case. We got to get to another break. Let's have a little fun. Let's talk about something bright and fun next. We'll talk all things NFL with Matt Verderame of SI coming up on 580 Sports Talk.
Big scars, glory lasts forever.
How can you not be romantic about football, man?
Every Monday at this time, we are joined by Matt Verderame, national NFL writer for Sports Illustrated, to talk all things National Football League here on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline on 580 WIBW. Matt, of course, writes for Sports Illustrated. That's where you can find all of his work, as well as SI.com, and you can find him on Twitter at Matt Verderame. Matt, how was your weekend?
It was good. No complaints. How was yours?
It was good. Enjoyed the good weather while we had it and stayed inside while it rained plenty this weekend as well. Mini camps opening up, well, quote unquote, mandatory mini camps opening up around the NFL this week. Matt, let's start off with a fairly general question. What is this number one storyline you are focusing on as mini camp gets underway this week?
I think just kind of starting to look at now these contract impasses around the league, right? I mean, Saquon Barkley, he's on the tag. He's one to watch. Hasn't signed the tag yet. Josh Jacobs, another running back. that you look at and go, okay, he's looking for his second deal just like Barkley is. You know, he had a phenomenal year last year, but really those two are very similar in the sense that when they're healthy, there's no question they're elite backs. The problem is you have to go, well, when they're healthy, because they've had issues with that in the past. And then you do look at other guys. You look at Quinn Williams on the Jets, who is under contract, who's just looking for an extension. Chris Jones with the Chiefs, obviously. Now he's looking for his third deal. He has 1 year left on his current contract. So just guys like that, who shows up, who doesn't. For the players like Jacobs and Barkley, they don't have to show up. They're on the tag. They haven't signed the tag. It doesn't matter. For guys like Jones and Williams, if they don't show up, they'll be fine. It's not going to change their lives or anything. But it'd be curious just to see kind of where these guys stand.
With those two tagged they were tagged. They have not signed their tags yet, running backs, right. Jacobs and Barkley. Right. Do you expect long-term deals to get done with one or either of the two of them sometime before the season starts?
Perfectly honest, it's a gut feeling. I think the Giants are going to pay Barkley. It's just, I think when you sign Daniel Jones for $40 million a year, you have to support him. You've got to give him every opportunity to be good to very good. And if you don't sign Barkley, I don't have a problem with that from the idea of, look, if you pay him, you're probably paying him very top of the market money. And I don't know that that's a great idea for any running back really in this day and age. But if there's a situation you're going to do it, it's helping Daniel Jones. I mean, to me, that makes a lot of sense. Now, with Jacobs, I feel like it's impossible to say what the Raiders are going to do because you don't know what's going on at quarterback. You don't know if McDaniels is going to be there after this year or Ziegler at the rate they're going. You don't know. I mean, they've paid some major contracts out here. So my inclination would be that in the past, they do typically pay their stars and then they kind of have a very top-heavy roster. But because of all the uncertainty there, I don't know what they're going to do because they could be cleaning house in a year.
The other running back who has been in the news plenty over the last couple of days, really going back into the early part of last week, Dalvin Cook. Why did Dalvin Cook fall out of favor with Minnesota so quickly? He's a guy who you look back at his recent stats. He's only been in the league for 6 years. He's only going to be 28 this coming season, and he's run for 1,100 yards 4 years in a row, Matt. Why did he fall out of favor to the point where it was a foregone conclusion Minnesota was going to dump him this offseason?
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's bizarre in the sense that he has been extremely productive. It's not as though you look at him and say, well, his best days are behind him. Now, maybe they are. Maybe he falls off a cliff this year. But to this point, he's been incredibly consistent, incredibly productive, and really behind an offensive line. It's been okay, but there's not anything that you go, it's top five in the league. I think, with Minnesota, again, last year they bring in new GM, new coach, and when that happens, a lot of times you see these sweeping personnel changes. And I think Minnesota knows the reality of it all. They went 13-4 last year. Nobody thinks that's a 13-win game. And so I think there is a thought of, okay, we got to turn the roster. Now, I would argue that cutting Dalvin Cook and getting nothing for him is not exactly ideal roster management. But I think they look at it as they're going to roll the cap space into next year. They're going to need every possible resource they have to rebuild the defense that last year was among the league's worst. And so I think that's what they're looking at. They're going to try to reallocate some of these resources. And even if they don't do it this year, it becomes rollover money and creates future cap space. But yeah, to just cut Dalvin Cook outright, look, it says two things. One, Minnesota's really looking to just turn this roster no matter what it takes. And two, it just goes to show, along with Barkley and Jacobs, how the running backs in the NFL today are valued. I mean, he's one of the best 5 running backs in football. Nobody was willing to give them a pick.
Matt Verderame covers the National Football League for Sports Illustrated, and he joins us Mondays here on 580 Sports Talk on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline. You can find Matt's work at si.com in the magazine, or you can find him on Twitter, and I suppose you can find him on Twitter at Matt Verderame. Matt, speaking of Dalvin Cook, 2 AFC teams have been listed as the most likely destinations for Cook as a free agent. One, his hometown Miami Dolphins. The other, the Denver Broncos. Which of those destinations do you think is more likely for Cook? And if he did wind up in the AFC West with Denver, how much of an impact could he have with them?
None. If Russell Wilson still stinks. I mean, if Russell Wilson can't throw the ball, it means nothing. right? I mean, we all know, like, Jonathan Taylor basically ran like God for Indianapolis a couple of years ago. They couldn't make the playoffs. I mean, to me, if Denver doesn't get better play out of its quarterback, Denver's irrelevant. Denver needs Wilson to not just be better, but to be top 12, top 14, bare minimum, just to have a shot at the playoffs because of how loaded the conference is. Now, with Miami's interesting because Miami just drafted a running back in the mid-rounds this year. On top of that, they have Mostert. They traded for Jeff Wilson a year ago. So they have a pretty crowded room. But, of course, none of those guys are Dalvin Cook. Cook, to me, makes sense in Miami from the standpoint of, again, kind of like I said about Daniel Jones, although Tua is much more talented, of course. Like, you're trying to take the load off of Tua a little bit. Like, if you can hand the ball off to Dalvin Cook 250 times, that's 250 times you don't have to worry about Tua getting hit. So I get it. And if I'm Dalvin Cook, I'd far prefer to go there. First of all, like you said, he's from there. Second of all, they're a better team. Third of all, I think for him, it's a better fit. Whereas when Javonte Williams comes back in Denver, if he's healthy, what does that split look like? So I think Miami makes a lot of sense.
At the risk of turning this into 580 Vikings talk, the Daniel Hunter news was pretty big news today that the 28-year-old defensive lineman, edge rusher, is planning to hold out from his team's mandatory minicamp this week. Those two sides appear to really be at quite an impasse. What do you think is the likelihood that Hunter plays somewhere else next year? And if the Vikings wanted to go in that direction, because as you mentioned, they're willing to maybe churn their roster a little bit, knowing that their 13 wins last year were a bit of smoke and mirrors. What could they expect to get in return for him?
I think he's got a pretty nice pick. I mean, look, they're not going to get a first-round pick at this point. You know, he's had a little bit of the injury bug at times, but when you look at Hunter, to me, he's one of the most underrated players in the NFL. There's a guy who year in and year out, when he's healthy and he's on the field, he's among the leaders in the league in sacks. I mean, he's absolutely capable of 15 sacks. So from that standpoint, you go, oh, first round pick. Well, the problem with that is he's on a contract where it's not a bad deal necessarily, but it's an expensive one. He's not on a rookie contract like Brian Burns was a year ago with the Panthers, where everybody was talking about what he would fetch. It's a different scenario, and so I think you factor that in. You also factor in the injuries. He's 28. It's not that he's old, but he's not 25. I think he'd probably get somewhere around maybe a late second, to third, depending on the team acquiring him. But I think if you're a team looking for an edge rusher and Minnesota's like, okay, look, we'll move him, you're not going to find too many guys who are available at this stage of the year who are more impactful than Daniel Hunter.
A few more minutes coming up with Matt Verderame from Sports Illustrated, NFL writer for SI. You can find his work in the magazine and at SI.com. You can also find him on Twitter at Matt Verderame. He joins us here on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline to talk all things NFL. When it comes to the Chiefs this time of year in particular, Matt, outside of the Chris Jones contract situation, and personally, I'm not too worried about that. We had this discussion I believe it was years ago now. Took a little while into the summer. They got the deal done. Everybody was happy. Yep. Chiefs have won a couple Super Bowls since then. Outside of Chris Jones, though, is there really anything that's intriguing about this Chiefs minicamp period up until training camp? Because Dan and I have talked about this a bunch. This has been a very boring offseason for the Chiefs, and that's a good thing. They just won a Super Bowl, and they haven't had any drama. But is there anything that really draws your eye on the field or in terms of what this roster will look like?
Well, I guess technically you could say, well, the Hopkins thing, does he at some point end up there? My feeling is probably not. Now, if they extend Jones and they knock $20 million off his cap number, that changes things. Then all of a sudden, if you're the Chiefs, well, you got money to spend. But outside of that, I mean, I'll give you one I'd look at, like L'Jarius Sneed. Are they going to extend him? Because this would be the time to do it. He's a weird case because he's never made a Pro Bowl, but he's a Pro Bowl level player. He is not a guy who has 7-8 picks a year. He's not the Marcus Peters ball hawk type, but he is invaluable to them in the way that they use him all over the field. What is his value, and would they pay him? I know for a fact, and I reported about this, when Travarius Ward became a free agent, they tried to bring him back. They got outbid. They wouldn't go over a certain number with 49ers. 49ers got him. I do know that they've talked to Snead's representation about a contract extension. This was a while back, was preliminary. Now, whether or not, things have gone further than that, well, that's state secrets. But I think if you're the Chiefs, you're going to have to make a determination because he's the kind of player that if he gets to free agency, he's going to draw significant interest. I mean, there are going to be multiple teams that are willing to give him real money. And so do you come to the table right now and say, you know what? We're willing to go 4-55. Would they do that? Because if they don't, fair enough. But then there's a real chance that next year he goes in his free agency. And if you want to retain him, you're probably going to have to go over your number in a bidding war. And they typically do not do that.
When the Chiefs took Shamari Connor in this year's draft, it was the 4th round, I believe they moved up to take him.
Yep.
Do you feel like that was more of a precursor to moving on eventually from Snead, or was that simply, that's our kind of player, we're going to keep adding our kinds of dudes and we'll make the roster work?
Well, Connor's got versatility. I almost look at Shamari Connor and say he might be a precursor to them moving off Justin Reed. Because Justin Reed next year, if you look at his cap situation, I don't think Justin Reed's seeing that year, that contract.
Mm-hmm.
Now he may get extended, but it's him and MVS are both in the same boat. They're either going to extend those two guys or they're cutting them because they're not playing on those numbers next year, and they have almost no dead money. So, you have Connor, you brought in Brian Edwards on a short-term deal from Tampa. You obviously have Brian Cook in the fold. If you're the Chiefs, do you say, okay, if we like what we see from Connor, would they move on? That's a risk. Reed's only, I think, 25 years old, despite how long he's been in the league. He's very young. But they'd have to consider that. I think the one thing with Snead is the Chiefs do have Williams, Watson, and McDuffie. The problem is if you let him go, McDuffie becomes a slot corner because Williams and Watson cannot play in the slot. And so now you basically landlock McDuffie. He can't go to the perimeter where he was very, very good last year. And you're forced to move him inside, and it becomes very easy for opponents to just move guys away from him. If you have Snead, well, now you got two guys who can play outside end in the slot, and the Chiefs dictate the matchups. I don't think it was any coincidence that once McDuffie came back and they had that versatility, their pass defense jumped massively. They only had one game with McDuffie last year. They gave up 300 passing yards, which was the Super Bowl. So I'd be curious to see what they do.
For all of Matt Verderame's work covering the National Football League, you can check him out in Sports Illustrated. You can also find his writing online at si.com, and you can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt Verderame. He joins us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline every Monday at the bottom of the 3 o'clock hour. Matt, we appreciate the time as always. Thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good, guys. Take care.
That is Matt Verderame from Sports Illustrated talking all things NFL. I know we've brought that up a number of times offhandedly, but that is interesting what the move is with Snead, because the Chiefs have made it very clear that if they don't want to re-sign someone, they'll let them play out the string on their contract and then let them walk. They don't have a problem with that, a la Tyrann Mathieu. But between drafting Shamari Connor, between trying to add a bunch of dudes in the secondary who have positional versatility, even if it's not everyone like Matt laid out, I don't know. I think that's a fascinating case. But you also have Patrick Mahomes saying he's a winner and I want him around.
I think they're prepared. I think what they wanted to do is be prepared for the possibility. I don't want to say inevitability, but the possibility that L'Jarius Sneed is not a Chief in 2024 and beyond. I think that you want to make sure that your bases are covered so that they don't ever want to go into the draft saying, hey, we have to draft a like-for-like replacement for this player, because that blows up your whole draft strategy.
Yeah,
that's not the kind of thing you ever want to be. You don't want to be in that spot. And I don't think Brett Veach likes being in that spot.
We'll talk a little more NFL minicamp coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. But first, after we come back from the news, Arthur Kaluma is the newest Kansas State Wildcat. What does that mean for Jerome Tang's team? Plus, we've got What Is Wrong With You also coming up next hour right here on 580 Sports Talk. hour of 580 Sports Talk coming your way here on the Sports Voice of Kansas, 580 WIBW. I'm Brendan Dorzinski. He is Dan Lucero. We're here with you until 6 o'clock today. We've got a little 580 Sports Talk overtime coming up at 6 o'clock until 6:30. And then pregame coverage begins for Royals baseball tonight as they open up a series against the red-hot Cincinnati Reds. 7:10 first pitch, that game at the K tonight. Zach Greinke on the bump. Luke Weaver going for the Reds. And, of course, you'll be able to hear all the action pre- and post-game right here on 580 WIBW and the Royals Radio Network. Coming up here in this 4 o'clock hour of the show today, we'll talk a little K-State hoops momentarily. Arthur Kaluma, the newest Wildcat. That is a big-time get for Jerome Tang. Today's What Is Wrong With You is on tap as well, brought to you by Top City Metal Supply, and we'll round up some of the big headlines from around the first day of NFL mandatory minicamps. Plus, we're getting to your texts. That text line number, you know it already, 785-272-9429. And you can hop into the comment section on YouTube as well. The name of our YouTube channel is Sports on 580 WIBW. Just go to youtube.com, search Sports on 580. We're the first result. You can subscribe right from the search page. If you haven't subscribed to us already, that's where you can go check out all of our video content, including today's video stream live through the rest of the show. It was broken this weekend that on his visit, former Creighton Blue Jay, 6'7" forward Arthur Kaluma is committing to Kansas State. This was a player who I wanted, before I knew Kevin McCullough was coming back to Kansas, I wanted KU to go out and get Arthur Kaluma. So I would be disingenuous if I said anything other than this is an awesome get for Kansas State. And it absolutely 100% is a great get for the K-State program. Couple notes here before we even get to who Kaluma is as a player. One, getting a guy to commit on a visit, you see that in football plenty of times, much less common in basketball, and even less common for transfers when they make their visit. You want a good example of this? Hunter Dickinson, his recruiting, his secondary recruitment, his transfer visits. KU was his first official visit. Then he took officials at multiple other schools before he ended up circling back and picking KU. It's just something that doesn't happen a lot for transfers. It happens for K-State. They sold Kaluma that much. K-State wasn't even listed. I want to say it was Adam Zagoria, who has written for a million different places about college basketball for decades. He didn't even have K-State as one of the initial teams who had reached out to Kaluma. He had Texas, Texas Tech, Kentucky, Alabama. Those were the schools that he had listed as initial interest in Kaluma. He had other visits set up with Alabama and with Kentucky that were scheduled for this week. He'd have been, I think, at Alabama right now, or it might have been Kentucky. Well, it was one at the start of the week, one at the end of the week. Jerome Tang and Ulrich Majiri and the entire staff and Dream Dowling, that's who else I wanted to shout out, they got this done on his visit. He canceled a visit to Alabama, which was the best team in the country last year. He canceled a visit to Kentucky, which is begging to get rid of playing time. They are begging anyone who is not an incoming freshman to come and play for them. The team that has, the most non-John Wooden national titles of anyone. They're begging for players
with significant NIL resources and backing and a track record of getting guys to the NBA draft, which Arthur Kaluma went through that whole process. And he, most places that I found that ranked prospects for this year's draft had Kaluma in the 40s, maybe the upper 50s. So a guy that might have gotten drafted, might not have, like a perfect candidate to come back to school and up his stock. Like Kentucky felt like a very kind of natural fit for a player like that. You go, hey, cash in on the NIL side, play for a coach that's turned that program into an NBA assembly line. Go do that. Or failing that, Alabama's got some playing time available for you, and maybe you want to go there. You want to play in the SEC. No, man, he didn't even bother going to those schools. He said, I don't need to see what they've got in Lexington. I don't need to see what's popping in Tuscaloosa. Manhattan is home. I have been here for 24 hours, presumably. They got him on campus and they got him committed in a 24-hour span. 24 hours was all it took.
Yeah, close to it. I mean, I was shocked. I really thought he was at least going to take the Kentucky visit. Alabama, I wasn't entirely surprised. Reports are out today that they're going to get Grant Nelson, the transfer from North Dakota State. They end up getting their guy. Great. K-State gets their guy. Great. The team that loses out is Kentucky. That is so funny. That is extremely funny that Kentucky is going to just run with 7 freshmen next year.
7 players, 5 freshmen.
Yeah, that's true. They've got 2 sophomores who didn't play last year. Incredible.
John Calipari has to be begging Antonio Reeves to come back to school, which by all accounts he's going to.
But you thought Hunter Dickinson got some NIL money to go to Kansas.
Like
they're going to give Antonio Reeves whatever he wants.
They need guys. They don't have guys, like players. Like, we're not talking about like players that are good or players that are good for Kentucky. We're talking about physical bodies. They're going to hang a shingle outside Rupp Arena. Have you ever seen a basketball? Can you dribble? Do you have eligibility?
Do you?
I do not.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't either. If you have college, like if you didn't go to school, you go call compliance at Kentucky. You might be able to play. As for Kaluma, I actually think, aside from the fact that Kentucky, it would have been a fit at Kentucky because they literally just don't have a full roster right now. I think this fit makes perfect sense for both parties. For Kansas State, and I have said this on the program before, I think that K-State really needed another reliable, high major talent to come in. And it's different than Keontae last year because that was an all-American caliber player from the beginning. Kaluma hasn't quite shown that, but we know he can play well and consistently enough at the high major level.
Can contribute to winning.
His high, I watched a lot of Creighton basketball last year. I loved watching last year's Creighton roster. A lot of fun. His highs are really, I mean, they're like top 40, top 30 NBA pick kind of talented. Now, he does have some lows. I think getting some of the mental mistakes worked out, that's going to be the big task for this K-State staff. I don't know if it's a focus issue. I don't know if this sounds mean to say, if it's a basketball IQ issue. I don't know. I think if you can work out some of those mental kinks, this can be a player who takes you from, they're a tournament team. Yeah, they're middle of the Big 12 tournament team to, I think this team can be top 4 in the Big 12.
Well, they were dying for a 3. Like, that was the glaring miss on this roster. When you lined it out position by position, you felt good about the guards with Tyler Perry and Cam Carter, and you felt good about the 4 with Naquan Tomlin, and David Gassan's back to play the 5. Jarrell Colbert redshirting. Your freshman most likely to contribute are both at the guard spots. Taj Manning's coming off a red shirt, but Taj Manning was your only 3.
Yeah.
Like, now you've got a nailed-on small forward who can switch, who can guard 1 through 4 and guard it well. Mm-hmm. One comparison I saw, and look, you can go to NBA draftaholic.biz or any one of 100 different websites, draftimbecile.ru. Like, there are hundreds of them out there, and you can get lost in the comparisons.
That site loves Alex Len. Guarantee it.
But one comparison that I saw come up for Arthur Kaluma that I think is not a bad one is OG Anunoby. If you remember him from his
Indiana,
played at Indiana, currently having a very nice NBA career with the Toronto Raptors. Sort of a defensive anchor type player on the wing, which you could say K-State didn't really have that last year. They were a good defensive team, but they didn't have that guy who Jerome Tang could say, I'm going to put you on Keontae George, or I'm going to put you on Grady Dick, or I'm going to put you on the other team's best player, and we are going to eliminate that threat, that scoring threat, that dribble drive threat, that playmaking threat. Arthur Kaluma can be that kind of defender. So just before you even get to the scoring stuff, I'm enthusiastic about what he brings as an athletic and switchable. Like, I'll give a name that the old heads will appreciate, because I guess I'm an old head too, like a Stacey Augmon type of player.
Okay.
Like that's kind of what I see with Arthur Kaluma on the defensive end. I think that's what he can be. Offensively, he's never been the focal point of an offense.
Right.
At Creighton, they've had the guards, Nemhard, who creates everything, and they had Trey Alexander. They had the Shireman kid. Like, Arthur Kaluma as a fourth option was a double-figure scorer.
And don't forget Kalkbrenner, too, who's kind of the glue of that team.
Yes, and when in doubt, throw it into the 7-footer who can score inside.
Which, like, if you have a 7-footer, that's what you should do.
Right. So, yeah, you could argue he was the fifth option a lot of times offensively. Still an 11-point-a-game guy. My question for him, doesn't look like he's going to be an elite shooter. Like that does not look like that's going to happen for him. Can he be respectable? Him and Naquan Tomlin is kind of the same thing for me. Like, both of them shoot the ball confidently.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they'll step into their shot. If you're not going to guard them, they'll take it. They're not going to say, oh, no, I'm scared to take this shot. They're not afraid of that shot. They just don't make it regularly enough to have made teams pay for, not closing out hard on them or not rotating out to them aggressively. That'll be the question, I think, for both Tomlin and Kaluma. I hope they rebound for each other and just lock each other in the gym this summer and rebound for each other, shooting corner threes and below the break threes. Because if they can get to like 33%, that's not elite, obviously, but that's good enough. That'd be plenty good enough. With as good a shooter as Perry is, with as good a shooter as Cam Carter can be, I think that'd be RJ Jones, I think, projects to be a really good shooter. I think that would be just fine. So the negatives for Kaluma are the 3-point shooting's not great, and we haven't seen him be in spots where it's late in the game and he has to get you a bucket. What is he going to do to make a play for you? Does he have that playmaking ability? Does he have that ability to score off the dribble? Is he going to take and make that pull-up jumper that Keontae Johnson always seemed to get K-State out of a rut? I don't know that he's got that in the bag, but can he take somebody off the dribble? Yeah, I think he can. He's super athletic. He can finish around the rim. And one thing that stood out to people who watched him at the NBA Draft Combine was that it does seem like his playmaking ability has some room to grow and ability to level up as well. So, and a perfect player, not necessarily. Is he Keontae Johnson? Like, is it a direct comparison? No. He's not Keontae Johnson. He's not necessarily going to be the kind of bucket getter that Keontae Johnson was, but he can score. He's played a lot of college basketball. He is going to soup up this team defensively in a way that I don't think you're going to really be able to appreciate until you see it. And that alone makes him a huge impact player. And once again, here we are mid-June talking about Jerome Tang and his staff doing their thing in the transfer portal. I'm not going to lie. There was some head scratching on my part, and I'm sure some head scratching on even K-State diehards' parts. Where are the players? Weren't they going to get more than just Tyler Perry out of this transfer portal? They bided their time. They waited to get somebody that was an ideal fit. And Arthur Kaluma is an ideal fit. He snaps right into place as the starting small forward for this next Wildcat team.
And I think for me, you often think about guys who want to go elsewhere to have a bigger role, that they are going to leave an established program, a program that had a great year, by the way. Creighton went to the Elite Eight. I mean, it was a really good year for the Creighton Blue Jays last year. One of the best years in program history. Guys who want to go from that kind of program, Big East school, great year, to have a bigger role. The common school of thought is you move down, that you're going to end up going, okay, I was in the Big East. Well, I'm going to end up in the American. Who's a better example of that than Bobby Pettiford for KU? He's going to get to be the guy at East Carolina when he was just a guy at KU. Great example there. Or another one of the KU transfers. Joe Yesufu was never going to be more than a 6th man, and given last year, maybe he was going to fall down to a 7th or 8th man. He goes to Washington State. It's a high major, but it's a low bar to have basketball success at that school. That makes sense. Going from one Elite Eight school to another in probably the second best conference in the country to the best conference in the country, that's not usually what you think of when you think, I want to go to a program and be a bigger star and have a bigger role than I have now. But it just fits with this K-State roster. And I feel like Kaluma's the kind of player, given, again, there were occasionally some, and I want to say this without sounding mean, because it's a critique a lot you can put on a lot of players, those mental lapses. I think sometimes that can happen when you expect to have a big role and you are the 4th or the 5th option. There were absolutely times last year where Arthur Kaluma was an afterthought because you had 4 other all Big East caliber dudes on the floor with him at the same time. I think for him, going to a spot where he can be relied on more, where he is going to have the faith in his coaches and his coaches the faith in him to say, Art, you've got to make the play here. We're down 2 at home. We're playing TCU. We've got to win this game. It's late February. Are you confident taking the shot? The answer is going to be yes. And I think he is going to thrive in that role. to the 3-point shooting comment, because I think, especially around here, if you don't follow, outside the Big 12, a lot of college basketball, or you maybe only care about the tournament, you probably saw him hit 4 3-pointers against Kansas in a and you thought, oh man, a 6'7" dude who can shoot the three that well? All right, we'll take it. Well, he's a career 31% 3-point shooter. 29% 3-point shooter. Last year, he shot 31%. He hasn't been great. It's streakiness, though. I've got his game log in front of me. Last 6 games of last year, Big East tournament, NCAA tournament, he was shooting 25% from 3. That's not good enough. At this level, as a wing player, even as a big wing, that's not good enough. The 6 games prior to that, the 6 games to end the Big East schedule, he shot 37.5%. That's 3 of every 8 is going down. That is absolutely good enough. You can certainly live with that from a player of Kaluma stature who can score off the bounce, who can score under the basket, and who's going to play great defense. You can absolutely live with that. If you can smooth that out a little bit, if you're K-State, and I mean, if he even shoots 34% from 3, I think you would happily take that and call that a win at that spot.
Yeah, him and Tomlin, I feel the exact same about as far as their 3-point shooting. If they can get to that level as shooters, just gives Perry and Carter so much more space, and the reserve guards, Jones and Ames, so much more space to operate in, to drive in the paint, and for Perry, gives him a little more space behind the arc as well, because he's going to be their best 3-point option this coming year. So I love the addition. I think it's I think it's as ideal a fit as Kansas State could possibly have come up with, and I say that including all the guys who found homes to this point. Right? To bring in a player who just he fits right in at the 3. So, I mean, I know they love Taj Manning and he's going to play, but now you don't need him to play 25, 30 minutes.
Right.
Now he can learn from a veteran guy, and they can bring him along and ask him to do less. So I just think it's an outstanding fit all the way around. A great job again by Tang and his staff. We have a little reaction. Barbara in the YouTube comments says, I'm so looking forward to basketball season right now. Yeah. She's fired up as a K-State fan. Totally understand that. Good text from the 785 here on our text line. From a lifelong diehard Jayhawk, I can't really think of somebody I'd rather have my kid play for than Tang. Great leader, great culture, bought into the success not only of the team, but the individual players. It's no surprise how well he is recruiting. Texter also adds, Alabama must have felt like the wrong place at the wrong time, which is a good line.
That is a very good line. You should be a little ashamed, but also very proud of that line. So we talk about floor raising and ceiling raising additions, specifically when it comes to college basketball. This is a ceiling raiser to me, because I said it a moment ago. I really do think this was a tournament team regardless, given the coaching staff, given the expectations they have for their young guys, the talent they're bringing back, the addition of Tyler Perry. I would have said, yes, this is a tournament team regardless, but we're looking at, probably middle-ish of the Big 12, if you told me, gun to your head, what seed does K-State get before this weekend going into next year's tournament, I would say like a 6, like maybe a really difficult 6 seed. This to me is a move that adds enough to K-State that I would put them in the group with Kansas, Houston, Texas as the top 4 teams in the Big 12 going into this year. I would put K-State 4th in that group and really wouldn't hesitate about it. Or maybe I should phrase as one of the 4 in that group, and I wouldn't really hesitate about that.
Yeah, I think that, Kansas is going to be the favorite. I think they're going to be the favorite by a pretty considerable distance. And I think Kansas State joins the group that includes Houston, Texas. I put TCU in that group.
Yeah, good point.
And we'll see how it shakes out at West Virginia, but I think they might have that kind of ceiling, maybe a less of a chance to get to that ceiling, because it's so much with the transfers. You don't know how that's going to congeal together, but that's a really talented roster.
Yeah.
But I would definitely include now Kansas State in that group of teams that's going to be running at the top of the league and, have a chance to be a top 4 seed on Selection Sunday. That's
really fun. Multiple outlets, CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports, which are actually sister publications. And I think the Athletics has been not static. They've been updating their list of transfers throughout the year, but multiple places have had Kaluma as a top 20 transfer in the entire class. And you were able to get him signed on June 10th, or get his commitment anyway on June 10th. That is a big deal. That is just incredible work. And to do it multiple years in a row, that's the kind of thing that you then can sell to other guys. You can sell in 2024 to guys who are coming out of the draft. We'll wait for you. We will wait. There is a spot here for you. You don't need to brush us off because you feel like there won't be a spot. We will wait for you. There is an opportunity here, and we are willing to take any number of guys at any number of positions, and it's going to work out. That's a really important thing that you can sell if you're K-State. Similarly, the kind of things we talk about with KU, that, hey, if you're a point guard, come to Kansas, you're going to go to the NBA, and you are going to put up All-American kind of numbers. That's just what our point guards do. Same with big men. That's now something K-State can sell going forward. That's a really nice tendency to have. We'll get to a break here on 580 Sports Talk. We'll find our first winner of the week in What Is Wrong With You coming up after this here on 580 WIBW.
What the hell?
Just about the bottom of the hour on this 4 o'clock hour, Monday afternoon. That means it's time for the first What Is Wrong With You of the week here on 580 Sports Talk. We've got two stories going head-to-head today as we start off a new week. This is now our third week of What Is Wrong With You for the month. We had a mini week to open things up.
Can we before we get into it, do an update on the previous What Is Wrong With You story?
Where are they now?
Yes, a little bit of a where are they now. Remember last week, one of our What Is Wrong With Yous was the 6 senior members of the Shenandoah softball team in upstate New York who decided they would rather go to prom than play in the state semifinals, potentially the state championships of their softball season. The state championship would have conflicted with the start of their prom, so they decided they weren't going to play on Saturday in the championship game. Their coach just said, well, then you won't play Friday either. You're either all in or you're not. And so they said, okay, yeah, then we're not in. We would rather go to prom. Shen, which we'll call them now because I'm going to mispronounce the name of their little school district, and my apologies for that. Shen softball did make the championship game on Saturday, lost in 11 innings, 1-0 in the final.
Oh, my God. Oh, I would never talk to those girls ever again.
No, never again.
Never again.
Especially not Kaylee or whatever her name was.
Yeah.
The one girl they named because she was the best player.
Man, she must have really pissed someone off.
I know, right?
Be the only one named in the story.
That's what you get for standing out.
Apparently so. Why don't you go first to lead off the weekend?
All right, we're going to Florida to start the week. Deltona, to be specific, in Volusia County, where a tree cutting crew was threatened with a weapon on Thursday. We meet Edward LeBron, the owner of Tree Timber, said cutting trees is already a dangerous business, but unpredictable homeowners are cause for extra concern. After disregarding consistent yelling from the neighbor of a home they were servicing Thursday, LeBron began to pay attention when the woman said, "You drop one more branch from that tree and I'll drop you." He could not believe what he had heard. "I took a closer look at her," LeBron told ClickOrlando.com. "The woman was literally holding a shotgun. I was like, Jesus Christ."
Oh, my God.
"I was terrified." He said she continued to complain about sawdust getting in her yard. Here we have one of my favorite quotes of the year and what is wrong with you so far. "She want to kill Mr. Tree Timber himself for freaking sawdust. That's insane," LeBron said.
Wow.
Mr. Tree Timber himself. When law enforcement arrived on the scene, he decided not to press charges. He added that things like this happen way too often.
What?
When he posted about it on Facebook, other tree-cutting business owners chimed in about their experiences, including, according to LeBron, people being chased by battle axes, ninja stars being thrown at people throwing nails in their trucks to pop their tires.
What?
In high-tension situations like this, LeBron's crew always tries to de-escalate the situation and walk away.
So he was servicing her house and she was freaking out about
No, this was the neighbor of a person's house he was servicing. So look, like, I got big trees at my house. I've had, like, last year, in fact, my wife had somebody out to take out a tree, like a stump, a tree that was in the front yard of our house. So, like, I understand that, you know, when the tree gets real big, sometimes the branches, they overhang. Sometimes people think, oh, they're doing us a favor. That tree with the dead branches is being removed or it's being trimmed. That's nice. But some people, when they get a little sawdust in their yard or maybe on their driveway, pull out a gun.
This is not a commentary about whether or not you should own a gun. This is a commentary on what you do with the gun you already own. I feel like people have gotten a little too comfortable threatening to use their weapon, their firearm, for things that are really you don't need to bring the gun to. Like,
Correct.
Okay, dude, you got too much sawdust. If you're really that mad about it, come outside and say, are you going to sweep this up? That would solve the whole thing.
Right. Like, you're cleaning this up, right? But yeah, that's part of the gig, I would imagine. Like,
unbelievable.
Yeah, we'll take care of it. We apologize for the inconvenience. And we'll part friends. Instead, no, she want to kill Mr. Tree Timber himself for freaking sawdust.
Unbelievable. Wow, that's incredible. Tough day for LeBron. Yikes. My story is going to take us to Nova Scotia. Have you paid attention to the news lately?
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on up in Canada?
A lot of fires.
A lot of fires. Fires that have been so devastating and large, they've been blowing smoke all over the United States eastern seaboard.
Yeah, it made New York look like Dune for a day.
Yeah, they had to postpone a bunch of baseball games, a lot going on. Understandably, the people of Canada have been told, do not light fires outside. It is a major wildfire risk. That is a huge problem. Normal people would say, well, duh. You might remember a story from, was it last year or 2 years ago? The gentleman who decided to, instead of mowing his lawn, he just lit his lawn on fire.
Yeah.
And people on a nearby ferry in British Columbia said, I think there's a wildfire in this guy's yard. He got in trouble for that. Well, we're going to Nova Scotia, where Corporal Chris Marshall of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police say that officers responded to reports of an open fire on private property Friday afternoon in the community of Lance, which is 50 kilometers north of Halifax. I do not know how many miles that is. Marshall says they found an unsupervised fire burning in a fire pit, and they had to use a hose to douse the flames. He says they gave a woman in the home on the property a ticket for igniting a blaze within 300 meters of the woods during a fire ban. All of Nova Scotia, I imagine all of Canada, is currently under a fire ban. This ticket was worth $28,872.50 Canadian. This woman lit a fire in her front yard, and it cost her $29,000. Just don't do it. Just listen to the order. Do not light a fire outside. It's very simple. I'm sorry you could not use your fire pit for a couple extra weeks. I'm sorry that your country is on fire. Just don't do it. It cost yourself $29,000. Do you know what losing $29,000 would do for me? I would be homeless.
It's not worth it.
I would not have much left.
It is not worth $29,000 to start a fire.
Unbelievably dumb. Wow. All the woods are just burning up all over here. Well, whatever. I'm going to light my yard on fire. Those are our two stories today. I'm going to vote for this woman who pulled out a shotgun on the landscaping company.
Tried to kill Mr. Tree Timber himself.
Like, do you really think that that's going to go well for you? Like, okay, you got sawdust in your yard. You are also now not going to get to enjoy your yard because you're going to prison because you murdered someone.
Yeah, people don't think that through. Just
I wish he had pressed charges, honestly.
I know, right? Like, people got to learn that their actions have consequences.
Like jail.
Then again, it is Florida we're talking about. They've, maybe she was standing her ground against the sawdust. Who can say?
Could have been. By the way, Vance joking on YouTube that's approximately the fine from our Canadian story, $15 American with exchange rates. It actually is quite a difference. It's just over $21.5 thousand American. That's still a lot of money and would ruin my life if I lost that much money because I turn on my fire pit. That does it for What Is Wrong With You, which, as always, is brought to you by our good friends at Top City Metal Supply, who cuts the metal you need to your specifications, which saves time, money, and material. Never settle when it comes to metal. That's Top City Metal Supply, who you can find on South Topeka Boulevard, halfway between Frito-Lay and Forbes Field. We've got to get to a timeout, but on the other side of this break, some news from around the opening day of NFL mini camps. Not a whole lot going on with the Chiefs. That's positive, but a few big names holding out who could be on the move. We'll discuss it next on 580 Sports Talk.
9 decades of
Brendan and Dan here with you on 580 Sports Talk, 441 on this Monday afternoon. Thanks so much for swinging by and hanging out with us. We've got a little overtime coming up at 6 o'clock today, or just past the top of the 6 o'clock hour. Matt Derrick spoke with Mic'd Up, Jake and Fulton earlier this afternoon. And we'll re-rack that, and we'll hear that conversation coming up for our 580 Sports Talk overtime conversation of the day, leading into Royals baseball. Did we ever get final confirmation of how many fish Fulton caught?
We did not get a final number.
Okay.
We know at least 2, which is more than 0, which is an upgrade on his bagel from 2022.
Oh, my God. That is never going to stop being funny.
Maybe he told the mic'd up listeners. I don't know. I didn't ask. Like, hey, he caught one. He took the picture. It didn't look photoshopped. Nah, that's good enough for me. That's enough redemption. That's all the redemption the man needs.
Let's get to some news and notes from around NFL mini camp, which opens up today. The guys on Mic'd Up are going to have some audio from Chiefs camp coming up tomorrow at 1:30. The big story from today is that Danielle Hunter, the edge rusher, who is way younger than I thought. I feel like he has been around forever.
No, that's a fact.
But Matt told us earlier, Matt Verderame, that he's 28?
Yeah, 28 years old.
How is that possible? I feel like he's been in the league since 2006.
I know.
He's been around for forever. He's holding out in Minnesota. And Kevin Seifert, who is the Vikings beat reporter for ESPN.com, indicated that this is not like some of the holdouts we've seen in recent years where guys will quote unquote hold in because their contract doesn't accrue anymore if you don't show up at all. So they show up, but they don't actually participate in workouts. They essentially just show up and be a malcontent and continue negotiating. He indicated that it's pretty much a situation where Hunter wants out. He does not want to be a member of the Minnesota Vikings anymore. We've talked about this franchise a number of times, that they're just in such a weird spot. You and I have talked about it. We've talked about it with Matt Verderame as well, that they're just in a weird spot. They don't have an elite quarterback. They've got a lot of good offensive pieces, and I think a good offensive-minded head coach, or a good play caller at the very least. But they don't really have a long-term plan. Like, Alexander Madison is fine at running back. He's not better than Dalvin Cook. They got rid of Cook because they're afraid he's going to get hurt and he costs too much money. They've got Justin Jefferson, but eventually you're going to have to pay him in the not-too-distant future. You let Adam Thielen walk away and hope that KJ Osborne can be a number 2 receiver. Your offensive line is very mediocre, and your defense sucked. It was awful. Like, what exactly are you doing in that spot if you're Minnesota? I don't blame Danielle Hunter for wanting out. I feel like he and their former edge rusher, Everson Griffin, both have had multiple instances in recent years where there were reports they wanted out, which seems bad, that the most important position on your defense, all the good players you have there want to leave, right? Seems like a problem. Somebody, I think, is going to give up a pretty good pick for Danielle Hunter. He's a good player. He's fast, strong, been always very solid off the edge. I don't think there are any lingering injury concerns for him at the moment. I would not be surprised if someone moved a second-round pick. It might be a team that's already good, so it's a late second. I would not be surprised if someone moved one to get a player like Hunter, though.
I'll say this for the Vikings. It's very hard in the aftermath of a year where you win 13 games to make a clear-eyed evaluation of where you stand and have it be, yeah, we're not that team. It would be very easy to say, no, we'll keep the good times rolling. We got Justin Jefferson. We got continuity at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try and add to this and keep the good times rolling, make a run at it again in the North, see if we can't get home field advantage again in the playoffs. That's not who they are. Nobody thinks that's who they are. And it's very clear that the Vikings, they don't think that's who they are either, that they understand that their ceiling is, they were very fortunate to win 13 games last year. So to be able to say, hey, look, we're wedded to Kirk Cousins. We may as well try to be as good as we can be with Kirk Cousins as our quarterback. But at the same time, it's time to start laying the groundwork for what it's going to look like when we aren't wedded to Kirk Cousins. And that's a tough balancing act to pull off, but it involves things like not committing long-term to Dalvin Cook and being willing to let him walk away. And it might involve trading Danielle Hunter for draft picks. Tough balancing act, tough high wire to walk, but I think the Vikings have done the hardest part of it, which is being honest with themselves about who they are and where they're at.
I think that's fair. That division might be really bad though this year, to be completely honest.
That's true, and it would be so tempting to think, hey, maybe 10 wins this division. Maybe we go 10-7, win this division.
I think it certainly can. I don't believe in Detroit. I don't think the Bears are going to take a huge step.
Mm-hmm.
The Packers probably are not going to win 10 games in all likelihood. I do not see that happening. 10 games should win that division. You only have to go 10-7. Running it back seems like it would make sense. But again, this feels like something that has now been brewing for quite a while, and someone's going to get a really good player. It'd be cool if it could be the Chiefs. It is not going to be the Chiefs because I don't think they're going to be willing to give up something for an already established player, even one as good as Danielle Hunter. The other big storyline, and because it's more than just one player, it is the running back position going into minicamp. We already know Dalvin Cook has been cut. He's a free agent. For what it's worth, I think he's going to go to Miami. I think he's going to end up a Dolphin.
I think so too.
You've got Josh Jacobs, who is holding out. He does not have to report to mandatory minicamp. He's not going to be fined or punished at all because he has not signed his franchise tag. Saquon Barkley, additionally, not going to show up at Giants minicamp. He has not signed his franchise tag. He does not have to show up. Today you have James Robinson, who in his rookie year, just a couple seasons ago, I believe that was the 2020 season, rushed over 1,000 yards as a undrafted rookie out of Illinois State, former Butler County product. Butler County to Illinois State, undrafted rookie rushes for over 1,000 yards for the Jags. 2 more years in the league, has already been traded, has missed some time due to a lower leg injury. He was cut today. He was cut. 3 years, a guy who rushed for 1,000 yards as a rookie. I don't know that he's going to get on a team again. Mike Reese of the Patriots, or of the Patriots beat for ESPN, seemed to indicate that this might be an injury concern, and that might be it, because the Patriots signed him this offseason and are already willing to offload him. And I think from the business side and like the football analyst side, it's understandable why running backs are not valued right now. But man, it would suck to be a good running back right now because the loyalty has never been there, but the money really isn't there unless you are truly like great. Like I think Christian McCaffrey is a legitimately great NFL player.
Yeah.
The money's been there for him. I think Saquon, even like a half a step below that, teams just don't see that as worth the money. And I think it's very possible, like Matt Verderame laid out for us last hour, he eventually gets paid. But these holdouts don't usually seem to end well in terms of getting a long-term relationship mended. And I don't know that it will work out for either Saquon or Josh Jacobs with their current organizations.
I'm going to side with Matt on the idea that the Giants will end up giving Saquon Barkley a contract.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird that they did it in the order in which they did it, but I think it just goes to show you the priorities in the NFL are what they are, that you'd rather get your deal done with a quarterback who, like, what is Daniel Jones? Is Daniel Jones a ceiling a top 10 quarterback in this league? Come on.
Honestly, no. I don't think he is. Or I don't think he has that ceiling.
I think we probably saw about what his ceiling is this past year, which is a guy that you can probably win some football games with if you emphasize the things he does well and limit him having to do the things that he doesn't do well.
He threw 15 touchdown passes.
Yeah.
Let's be realistic here.
$40 million a year.
Through 15 touchdown passes, man.
$40 million a year for that because you're afraid of what happens if you're worse at that position. And that's understandable. Like, that's how Kirk Cousins has gotten the money that he's gotten.
Yeah.
That's how Derek Carr has gotten paid the way he's gotten paid. That you're afraid to be below average at quarterback. But part of emphasizing what he does well is giving him a dude in the backfield next to him who's a great pass catcher. And Saquon Barkley, healthy Saquon Barkley, is as good as anybody in the league. Like, failing, and aside from Christian McCaffrey, there's not a better fit for what the Giants want to do and have to do with a quarterback like Daniel Jones than Saquon Barkley. I think they know that. I think they'll pay him. They might regret it. They might regret paying Jones more than they regret paying Barkley in the end, but they're going to have to pay both of them if they want to keep things moving forward. They got some positive momentum back as a franchise last year. They want to keep that train moving forward. They got to pay them both. So
Pro Football Reference has a stat. It's abbreviated as NEA. It's ANY/A, and it's kind of a mouthful, but it's adjusted net yards per passing attempt. Essentially, it weights passing touchdowns, passing yards, interceptions thrown, number of sacks you take. And it puts that all into a number. The number last year for Daniel Jones was 5.89. That ranked 21st in the NFL. You know who his closest contemporary was in that statistic? Marcus Mariota, who, as much as I love the guy, did not by any measure have a good season last year. He was quite bad last season. For what it's worth, a good number. Patrick Mahomes was just under 8, like 7.93. That's a really good number. Tua led the NFL in that category, by the way, because he really didn't get sacked. He got hit in the head a lot, but he didn't get sacked a whole lot. He didn't throw many picks. Anyway, and Mahomes threw 12 of them. That's the only reason why he was below Tua. Anyway, beside the point. I think we are going to evolve beyond teams, or we are at a point where I think we are evolving beyond teams taking the really safe quarterbacks in the draft. Like 10 years ago, I don't know that Anthony Richardson's the number 3 overall pick. Or number 4, excuse me. Because I think teams would have been more scared away by what he cannot do, or at least what he hasn't shown. And they would have rather taken Will Levis in that spot. Yeah, the ceiling is way lower, but he's probably not going to, there's not as much risk.
Higher floor.
It's the Jared Goff principle. Jared Goff would not be taken number 1 overall today. He'd be probably a first rounder. He had a good college career, but he's not a number 1 overall pick. But he was in 2016. I think in the draft, we are getting to that point where you're looking at upside more than you're looking at, well, what can't they do? We still haven't gotten there in terms of quarterbacks yet. And I think that's the situation the Giants are in. That's the situation the Vikings have been in. And when you look at the teams that are on the rise and legitimately contending, what do pretty much all of them have in common? They've either got an elite quarterback or they've got a quarterback who you believe at some point is going to get to that point. Mahomes, the best in the business. Allen, I would say, is in the elite tier. I think Joe Burrow is in that tier.
Yeah.
I think Herbert is just a little bit behind that, but obviously he's really damn good. I think Trevor Lawrence is one more really good year away from being in that same kind of conversation. You're never winning anything if you're allocating all of your money to dudes who just aren't special. And I think if you are one of these teams with an iffy quarterback situation, you're probably in a better off spot spending on good to great position players around these quarterbacks than spending a ton of money on guys who aren't going to win you anything anyway. Like if you're the Giants, I would rather pay Saquon than pay Daniel Jones. I agree with you. I would have flipped it. I would have tagged Jones and said, let's see if you can do it again.
Yeah, prove it.
Kept Barkley because if he's healthy, Barkley is good. Same thing in Vegas. I mean, they're idiots. The whole franchise is run by dopes. But you just gave $70+ million to Jimmy G. And I know they can get out of it after 2 years, but still. That's a lot of money to a dude whose entire career has been be pretty and don't throw interceptions. Like if your whole goal for your quarterback is don't throw interceptions, you're screwed. You're not winning a Super Bowl. You're not going to the playoffs in their situation. You know who's really good at what they do? Josh Jacobs. He led the NFL in rushing yards last year.
Yeah.
And I know running backs fall off, but like if you were a smart team, wouldn't you rather say, let's pay this guy, even if it's a 3-year overpay deal, right? 3 years for above market value for Josh Jacobs. Wouldn't you rather have that guy and take a shot in the draft on Caleb Williams or Drake May or Quinn Ewers or someone like that next year? Wouldn't that make more sense than saying, let's give $70 million to Jimmy Garoppolo and then tell our second best offensive playmaker to go kick rocks?
I think there's going to be a tipping point, and we might get there sooner rather than later, where running backs, elite, great running backs actually get undervalued. And I think you saw a glimpse of that with what it took the 49ers to get Christian McCaffrey in a midseason trade and how much he transformed that team and that offense. I think the elite running back will eventually swing all the way around to maybe being undervalued a little bit.
Because I can understand, like, just good players getting let go. I get it. And I get they get banged up easily. It's a passing league. Understand all of that. But if you've got greatness, you should keep greatness.
Yes.
Instead of paying Daniel Jones.
It's good to have elite players, regardless of the position. Having elite talent is a plus. Ask the Chiefs.
Yeah, there's perfect example of it. We have to get to our national news break here at the top of the 5 o'clock hour. When we come back, we've got today's 580 Sports Talk headlines, some notes on a great recruiting weekend for KU football, and we'll preview Royals Reds. All next hour on 580 Sports Talk.
John.
We've got just 1 hour to go on this Monday edition of 580 Sports Talk. Brendan Dworzinski and Dan Lucero joining you up until 6. Then a little 580 Sports Talk overtime, and then Royals baseball series opener against the Cincinnati Reds. Live from Kauffman Stadium, and you'll be able to hear all the action and the pre- and post-game shows live right here on 580 WIBW and the Royals Radio Network. We will preview that matchup coming up a little bit later on in this hour. Zach Greinke versus Luke Weaver, your pitching matchup for tonight. Royals also made a roster move today. Jackie Bradley Jr. has been designated for assignment. Meanwhile, Dairon Blanco has been recalled from AAA. He was added to the 40-man roster and then brought up from AAA.
He's in the lineup tonight as well. He is going to play left field tonight.
Good for him. Good for Dairon Blanco. How many games did he play last year? 5?
It wasn't many.
Yeah, it was something like that. He leads all of minor league baseball in stolen bases this year with 47. That is absurd. Yeah, he played 5 games last year, went 2 for 7 at the plate, and stole a base. So there you go. Also, 4 of the 5 outs he made were strikeouts. That's kind of funny. Not going to lie. That's pretty funny. So he is the newest member of the 26-man roster. He'll make his season debut coming up tonight. And again, we'll preview that game coming up in just a little bit. Before we get there, also coming up in this hour, our 580 Sports Talk headlines, including the playoff roundup and more. Plus, we'll get to a quick note on some KU football news and recruiting today. Great weekend for KU. And one of the best recruits in the recruiting service era history for Kansas, announcing his verbal commitment to the Jayhawks and Lance Leipold today. We'll talk about Austin Alexander and the rest of a great weekend for KU coming up here in just a little bit. We're still taking your texts. The text line number 785-272-9429. And your YouTube comments. YouTube channel is called Sports on 580 WIBW. Just go to YouTube, search Sports on 580. We're the first result. Easy enough to find us. And that's where you can find the video live stream of today's show and every show here on 580 Sports Talk. So without further ado, let's jump into today's 580 Sports Talk headlines. And my first headline today, Dan, is going to come from J.J. Piccolo, who spoke to reporters today at the K ahead of this series with the Cincinnati Reds. And the Royals general manager was asked about the availability of Salvador Perez, and specifically the report from Ken Rosenthal at The Athletic this past week that the Royals, or at least some teams around baseball, believe the Royals could be intrigued about trading Salvador Perez. Here's what Piccolo had to say, though. Quote, "We have no intention of trading Salvi. It's not something we're looking to do, but it doesn't mean that teams won't ask about him. I can confirm that report was accurate. A team called and asked about him." refreshing honesty. Nice. He goes on to say this about Salvi's reaction to that. He knows he's a good player. He knows teams are going to ask about him. I think we all have to keep in mind he's got full no trade rights. He completely controls his destiny. He's told us over and over again he wants to be a Royal his whole career. That is, if he does not want to leave, he is not going to leave since he controls his destiny, as JJ Piccolo says, because his contract is quite large. And you can't just DFA that contract, essentially, and make it go away. Salvi this year is getting paid $20 million. His base salary next year is $20 million. And in 2025, it's $22 million. He's got a club option in 2026. Salvi's got a no trade clause. He is not going anywhere at this point. It's the 10-5 rights, correct? If I'm not mistaken, unless they baked in a no trade clause into this contract that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, most players end up with their 10-5 rights, which are 10 years in the league, 5 with the same team is what that means. And that gives you a little say on what they do with you. But there are also contracts that contain a no trade clause that you can sign before your 10-5 rights kick in.
This has to be at least somewhat encouraging if you are a Royals fan and a Salvador Perez fan, that your favorite player, I'm just going to assume for most Royals fans, your favorite player on the team is Salvador Perez. That's just going to be my guess. I think that's a fairly educated guess. You're not going to see him playing for another team anytime in the near future. He's going to stick around for the long run. And look, he's still producing. It's not like he stinks all of a sudden. I mean, he is still producing, and granted, the bar is pretty low for the 2023 Kansas City Royals, but for the season, 273 average, 502 slug. His OPS is over 800. He's got 13 home runs. I mean, this is Salvador Perez. He is who he is. He's going to be I think there's a good chance he's an all-star again this year. Maybe it's not nailed on, but I think there's a chance at it. Good to know that he is not going anywhere, but I'm also not surprised teams called about him. I mean, if you need a bat, whether it's at catcher or designated hitter, now that the DH is in both leagues too, honestly, I think most teams should call about him. They're not going to get him, but I think most teams should call about him, honestly. Who couldn't use a guy who's going to hit 25-plus home runs a year?
As a catcher, yeah, which no one else is doing with that kind of regularity. But a little peace of mind for Royals fans, even the disgruntled ones. It sounds like Salvador Perez is not going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah, always kind of a relief when you can hear something like that from the big boss, that at least in this miserable season, the one constant throughout the last decade plus of Royals baseball is going to continue to be that constant, wearing the number 13. First headline for me today, it was massive news. It startled the sports world last week when the PGA Tour and Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund announced a coming together of resources that would merge the PGA Tour, the European DP World Tour, and the Public Investment Fund. Crucially, not Live Golf, just the Public Investment Fund under one roof, and would give essentially the PIF a big amount of financial interest in professional golf worldwide. Well, it seemed a little fishy from the get-go that both parties admitted that a big part of the reason why they wanted to have this coming together was to avoid antitrust lawsuits and antitrust litigation. That's the kind of admission that usually gets the attention of lawmakers. And so today, the U.S. Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations has opened a review of this planned alliance. The chairman of the subcommittee, Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut, notified PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan of the inquiry in a letter today. In the letter, Blumenthal wrote, while few details of the agreement are known, PIF's role as an arm of the Saudi government and PGA Tour's sudden and drastic reversal of position concerning Live Golf raised serious questions regarding the reasons for and terms behind the announced agreement. Also from the letter, PGA Tour's agreement with PIF regarding Live Golf raises concerns about the Saudi government's role in influencing this effort and the risks posed by a foreign government entity assuming control over a cherished American institution. PIF has announced that it intends to use investments in sports to further the Saudi government's strategic objectives. The PGA Tour has said that the new agreement would not affect its operation, would continue to operate as a tax-exempt nonprofit would control its scheduling, sanctioning events, rules, and competition. Blumenthal told Monahan that the tour's alliance with the Saudis might put its tax-exempt status at risk. So maybe this big thing that we all assumed was going to happen, maybe we should pump the brakes on it, because we're going to hear from this committee and we're going to hear from the DOJ on this in all likelihood. And it would not be surprising at all to me if none of this comes to pass.
Something I saw this weekend, and you probably know more about this than I do. One of the reasons why the PGA Tour may have wanted to get this done is that they did not think they could win a drawn-out legal battle with the PIF, because the PIF has a lot more money than the PGA Tour has.
Yes, the PGA Tour has like a $2 billion war chest, which is a lot.
A lot of money.
The PIF is worth like hundreds of billions of dollars.
$620 billion.
Yes.
Which
is a lot more than two.
That is, by the way, $2 billion is 0.3% of $620 billion. Less than a half of 1%. Less than a third of 1% as much money. I would not want to get in a legal battle with that kind of entity. So I can understand why the PGA would want to do that. My official stance on this, also as a total outsider, is, you're going to lose your tax exempt status over this? Oh, so sad. Anyway, what's on TV tonight? Like, sorry, tough. You want to dance with the devil? You've got to dance with all the baggage that the devil brings too. And that's going to be losing tax exempt status. If that means losing tax exempt status, good.
The PGA Tour and Live Golf League have until June 26th to produce requested documents to the subcommittee.
I'm sure that's going to happen. I'm sure that's going to work out for them. Best of luck with the court case coming up soon, guys.
Love having that hang over your head with the U.S. Open this week.
Yeah, that's great. That's really what you want people to be talking about is court cases when you've got one of your biggest events of the year coming up. That's good. Where is the U.S. Open this year?
Los Angeles Country Club.
Oh. I don't think I knew there was a Los Angeles Country Club, to be honest with you.
There is.
Yeah.
It's a very cool looking course. A lot of barranca.
I don't know what that is.
It's like a dried out old riverbed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that sounds cool. I can get down with that. Next headline for me on today's 580 Sports Talk headlines. How about we get to the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame class of 2023? It is a big class. It is deep. So we'll just run through some of the names here and let you know who is going to be inducted this season. It includes Wichita native and former KU All-American softball player Jill Larson-Bradney, All-American decathlete and a 3-time D2 track and field coach of the year at Pitt State, Russ Jewett from Olathe. 3-time All-Missouri Valley Conference basketball selection and an honorable mention All-American from Wichita State, Lindbert Cheese Johnson. Oscar Johnson, nicknamed Heavy, a Negro Leagues Baseball Triple Crown winner. He's originally from Atchison. Wichita State baseball assistant coach and athletic department official Brent Chemnitz. I told you, this is a big class. 8-time All-American selection in cross country and track, at Pittsburgh State, Christy Allen Logue, originally from Altamont. Professional golfer and 2-time member of the U.S. Ryder Cup team, Jug McSpadden from Monticello, or is it Monticello?
I think it's Monticello.
Monticello. I've gotten that wrong many times. 14-year Major League Baseball player Ray Muller from Pittsburgh. K-State baseball player and 13-year MLB veteran Ted Power from Abilene. What a great name, Ted Power.
It is. It's a good name.
17-time pro soccer all-star from the Wichita Wings. You're going to have to help me with this one.
Kim Runtved.
Runtved. Did you cover Kim Runtved?
He was the coach of the Wichita B-52s.
How about that?
The Rocket, Kim Runtved.
1984 honorable mention All-American basketball selection and 2-time All-Conference pick Ricky Ross from Wichita.
Wichita South and Tulsa.
A 2-time Missouri Valley Conference volleyball player of the year, 2007 All-American Sarah Lundgren Walkup. That is your 2023 Kansas Sports Hall of Fame class.
If you've never been to the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame, believe it's still at the Wichita Boathouse.
I believe it is.
You should go check it out. It's really cool. It's a really cool way to spend a couple of hours on an afternoon. The ballpark's not far away. Make a day out of it. If you haven't been to a Wind Surge game, make a day, make an evening out of it, and go check out the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. They really do a good job with it.
I've never been. I've been to Wichita plenty of times. I've never actually been to the Hall of Fame, though. I feel like that's a missed opportunity. How close is it to Riverfront Stadium?
It's the other side of the river.
Oh, well, how about that?
Just the other side of the river. Like
yeah.
Forget what street it is. Oh my gosh, that's bad because I lived there for close to 2 years. So I forget the street that you go right by the first base side of the Riverfront Stadium.
Waterman Street?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Wichita Street?
Well, it might be Waterman. You go over the river and then it's on the right.
Okay, yeah, no, I know exactly where this is because I parked right next to it when we went to a game this summer.
The river walk area, the water walk area. They don't call it the river walk, the water walk.
No, that is very cool. There's a lot of very impressive resumes on that list right there.
Yeah.
Multiple All-Americans, KU, Wichita State, K-State, all being respected. Very, very cool for all of them.
Continue our 5A Sports Talk headlines. Let's run you the list of the balloting leaders in the Major League Baseball All-Star balloting. Update number 1 was released today by Major League Baseball. And if the voting were to stop today, this is the list of the players who would be starting. First for the American League, the catcher would be Baltimore's Adley Rutschman, a very Blue Jay heavy infield with first baseman Vladimir Guerrero Jr., third baseman Matt Chapman, and shortstop Bo Bichette, the lone non-Blue Jay in the infield, second baseman Marcus Semien. The outfield of New York's Aaron Judge, Los Angeles' Mike Trout, and Houston's Jordan Alvarez, and the DH, of course, the incomparable Shohei Ohtani of the Angels. In the National League, the backstop would be Atlanta's Sean Murphy, who Royals fans will remember had a field day against them back in April. On the infield, Freddie Freeman of the Dodgers at first base, Marlins second baseman Luis Arraez, St. Louis third baseman Nolan Arenado, and Braves shortstop Orlando Arcia. The outfield, another Brave, Ronald Acuna Jr., along with Dodgers star Mookie Betts, and Arizona's Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who's had a terrific first half.
Mm-hmm.
The DH leading the way in the National League balloting, Los Angeles' J.D. Martinez. I like to nitpick this stuff. I can't really nitpick this. This is the electorate did a pretty good job to this point. I don't think Vladimir Guerrero is the best first baseman right now in the American League, to throw that one out there. But like, this is not an embarrassing, like if this were the guys who started the All-Star game for 2023, it is not like, it's not embarrassing. Like, pretty good job by the voters. They're paying attention.
How surprised are you that Shohei Ohtani is not the leading vote getter among all players?
He is in the American League, but the leading vote getter among all players is Ronald Acuna Jr. I guess I'm a little surprised, but at the same time, Ronald Acuna Jr. is just so cool.
Also, the Braves have a gigantic fan base.
Yes.
It's
also
called the South.
Typically, too, you end up with an outfielder being the leading vote getter because you vote for 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you're just straight ticket, like, Royals voter, you didn't vote for Shohei Ohtani. You voted for whoever the DH, probably Vinny Pasquantino.
Yeah.
Or
I think Vinny's at first.
Yeah,
actually.
You might be right. It might be Nick Pratto, actually, who's the DH on the ballot from the Royals on the American League. But like, yeah, if you're a straight ticket Yankee voter or Astro voter, you don't vote for them, but you might not vote for all your team's outfielders. And you might say, okay, yeah, I'll vote for a guy who's actually awesome. And then you vote for Ronald Acuna Jr., who is awesome. It's his MVP to lose in the National League this year. He's got 13 homers and 28 stolen bases. He rules.
Yeah, he's awesome. 37 runs batted in. He's hitting 331, 965 OPS. He's been awesome. No, this is a fun group. This is a really fun list of potential all-stars. By the way, Luis Arraez, down to 397 for the year.
Oh yeah.
Had I think a 1 for 5 this weekend.
What? 1 hit?
Yeah. Dropped him to
weak,
under 400 for the season. Next headline for me on our 580 Sports Talk headlines on this Monday, June 12th. Minor note from the NBA today, but a player who still, I don't know about around these parts, but in the state of Kansas, whose name still carries a bunch of weight, Fred VanVleet is going to opt out of his contract with the Toronto Raptors. That's going to make him one of the more free agents, I think, in the NBA this year. Obviously was a star at Wichita State on some of their best teams in program history, has been very good with the Raptors, got a massive bag after the Raptors won the NBA championship. He was great on their run to the title as probably the third best player on that team after Kawhi and Siakam.
And then he leveled up even more and made an all-star team after that.
Yeah, he's been really, really good in his NBA career. He's going to be a free agent, and that's the kind of player I think almost every team in the NBA is going to want. Good shooter, good, reliable scorer, tough as nails. I think he is going to get a lot of money this offseason. It's not a great free agent class in the NBA. That's why I think he's going to get paid in the sometime this offseason.
College basketball transfer portal news for our next 580 Sports Talk headline. Grant Nelson out of North Dakota State is headed to Alabama. So 24 hours after the Crimson Tide lose out on Arthur Kaluma, who of course chose Kansas State. Nate Oates and his staff rebound by getting the commitment of Nelson, who I believe is 6'11".
He's huge.
Yeah, big kid, averaged 18 and 9 with almost 2 blocks per game last year at North Dakota State. Was very high on every list of potential transfers, and a guy with the kind of skill set that makes him look like a future NBA player. Going to get a chance to test it out at a higher level playing in the SEC next year. So Alabama gets Grant Nelson.
There was a lot of talk about him staying in the draft. His narrative throughout this entire portal process has been all over the place. At first it was he's going to test the NBA draft, but he's probably coming back to college and he wants to stay at North Dakota State because they're the only school that offered him and he's very loyal to the coaching staff. Then it became, well, he's actually going to stay in the draft because he's going to get a lot of good feedback. Then it was actually NBA teams don't want him because they don't trust his shooting ability and he's not a good enough athlete right now. So he's going to come back to college and probably not at North Dakota State. I think if you asked both programs, Alabama and Kansas State, are you happy with the way the last 72 hours have shaken out? I think both would tell you it ended up as well as they could have hoped. I think Alabama would have been happy with Arthur Kaluma. I don't know that K-State was ever interested in Nelson. I'm sure if they could have gotten him, they would have been happy with him. But I think both teams would tell you we got the best fit for our roster right now.
And that may have been as simple as it was for Kaluma with the K-State staff being able to explain to him, look, everybody else who wants you has options. Like they've got a bunch of other guys that they're also looking at. You're our guy. You're who we want. We don't have a plan B. We want you. And that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, that's extremely compelling. And again, we talked about this when we talked about Arthur Kaluma earlier on in the show. Kentucky doesn't have any players.
No.
He canceled a visit to Kentucky, which is giving away playing time to veteran players. That is absolutely incredible. Final headline for us today on our 580 Sports Talk headline. Should we get to the playoff roundup?
Yeah, I think it's time we do the
Playoffs
roundup. We're running out of days for the playoff roundup. Either way, things break from here. We're in the final week, essentially, of the playoff roundup. The latest that the championship series in both the NHL and the NBA can go would be this weekend. And so, yeah, we're into the final week of the playoff roundup.
Game 5 for the NHL Stanley Cup final is tomorrow night. I think both these series are done. We'll get to the NBA game right now, but I think both these series are done after 5 games. Wednesday might be our final one. Wow.
Yeah.
How sad is that?
So in
these playoffs go on for so long. Oh my God.
Yes, they do. No NHL game tonight, as Brendan mentioned. Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals is tomorrow in Las Vegas, with the Golden Knights holding a 3-1 series lead over the Panthers, looking to claim that franchise's first Stanley Cup championship. Game 5 of the NBA Finals is tonight in Denver as the Nuggets look to claim their first NBA championship in Larry O'Brien Trophy with a 3-1 series lead on the Miami Heat. The Heat have one more card left to play from their deck. We'll see if or how much they play it. But Tyler Hero listed as questionable tonight after missing every game since game 1 of these playoffs with a broken hand. Hero has been upgraded to questionable and by all accounts is going to try and play. Theoretically, it would be a nice boost for the Heat to get their second leading scorer and one of their best three-point shooters back in the lineup. But we also know, because Hero told reporters last week, it hurts when he shoots the ball. That seems bad. Also,
yeah, just a little bit.
Also, he hasn't played a basketball game in close to 2 months. So who knows what kind of impact Hero will have if he plays, how much he would possibly play. But that's the last card in Eric Spoelstra's deck, because in the 4 games in this series, Miami snuck game 2 in Denver and have to come in believing that they can win in the Mile High altitude. But the 3 games that Denver has won, they've won by double digits. And though Miami is so stubborn as hell and they won't quit and they make it close, they keep you within arm's length. Double-digit victories in 3 of the 4 games and a 3-point loss in the other kind of tell you like who the better team is in the series. Speaking on a very personal level now, if I may, for a moment.
Please.
Last year, about this time, a couple of weeks after, a year ago, a couple of weeks from now, the Colorado Avalanche had a 3-1 series lead in the Stanley Cup final, and they came home for game 5, and they did not win. And to a man, it became part of their like narrative after the fact to say, look, we put too much pressure on ourselves to win that game because it would have been our first title as a group. And we were playing at home. We really wanted it. We put a little too much pressure on ourselves. We had to step back and say, hey, you just go play a hockey game. And they ended up winning game 6 on the road and winning the Stanley Cup. That is my greatest level of concern tonight, is something that happened in a completely unrelated sport 1 year ago. I do not think that Denver is going to get caught napping or slipping tonight. I think they understand the opportunity that's in front of them. I think they are clearly the better team, barring outliers shooting performances, which you cannot bar entirely because that's how Miami got here. But barring that, it sure feels like the Nuggets are going to host the Larry O'Brien Trophy tonight.
I think they will. I think they're going to take care of business tonight. The spread in most places is 9 points.
8.5 from our friends at FanDuel, but 9 in a lot of other places.
Yeah, I've got one here from WinBet, which we don't actually have in our state. The spread at that sportsbook is 9 points. 70% of the bets and 70% of the money are on Miami to either keep it close or win this game. I don't see it happening, to be completely honest with you. I know they could shoot the lights out, and if that happens, that's basketball. Sometimes you just get outshot, and that's how you lose games, and you move on to game 6. Which, no, you are not looking forward to on Thursday because you have a flight that day.
Yes, I would be on an airplane during game 6 of the NBA Finals, which just sounds torturous. Like, I really, like, on a personal level, I kind of need it to end tonight.
Yeah, that's fair. That's entirely fair.
I kind of need it to end tonight. Mark in the YouTube comments asking if I'll party or dance. I don't know. Like, I've had people ask me, like, what?
Yes, absolutely. No, the answer is yes. You've waited for this literally your whole life.
Right, correct. But I do not know. I told a friend of mine, I don't know how my brain is going to process like the game being over and the confetti and the Larry O'Brien Trophy, and it's for the Denver Nuggets. They've never done it. It still doesn't compute that they're even this close, that they're even in the finals at all. It's been hard to wrap my brain around because of what the Nuggets have been most of my life. And if they win tonight, it will be an emotional time at Lucero Manor if the Nuggets pull it out. I don't know exactly what I will do, but I gave my wife permission to videotape me one way or another. So we'll see how that goes. Well, you will never see that film.
Are there going to be a lot of Nuggets dignitaries in attendance?
David Thompson, the Skywalker, will be there. We know that. We also know that Dan Issel's been at every game. One of the 2 of the greatest Nuggets of all time. They've been there for most of the home games. I think they'll both be there tonight. I don't know about any others. I would assume Alex English, if he's available,
he better be.
Will be in the building. The all-time leading scorer in the 1980s in the NBA.
Yeah,
Alex English, the greatest scorer of the 80s. Red Panda is going to be in the building. She's not a Nuggets dignitary, but she's a dignitary.
Oh yeah,
Red Panda's doing a halftime show tonight.
It's serious. Man, Red Panda's there.
Yeah, Red Panda being in the building made me feel really good. That gave me some good vibes. Like Miami's not going to fold. They don't have any punk in them, but I also think they know that they're outgunned, and that if it goes really well for the Nuggets in the first quarter, like if they can jump out, maybe take a 6-8 point lead after one, it could be a game that Denver just is never threatened in. I don't think that's super likely because, again, I just have too much respect for the Heat and how stubborn they are and how close I think they'll play it throughout the night. But I do think tonight's the night.
I think they're getting it done. I picked Nuggets in 5. I'm still pretty confident in that. That does it for today's 580 Sports Talk headlines. We've got to get to a break. On the other side of this timeout, though, some notes on KU football. What a weekend for Lance Leipold and his staff on the recruiting trail. We'll tell you about it next on 580 Sports Talk. 6:36 on 580 Sports Talk on this Monday, June 12th. Brendan and Dan here with you. It was a big weekend and continues to be a big week for KU football on the recruiting trail. We'll talk all about it with Michael Swain coming up tomorrow for Jayhawk Weekly here on 580 Sports Talk. That'll be bottom of the 4 o'clock hour tomorrow. But KU has pulled in 3 commitments this week, including one of their very highest ranked commitment of the Lance Leipold era. And a guy in Austin Alexander, that's the name of the player, 4-star cornerback from the Chicago suburbs, who, if he ends up enrolling at KU, would be one of the top 12 highest ranked recruits in the history of the recruiting services era, going back to 1999. This is a player, we talked about Arthur Kaluma on the K-State basketball side, who visited K-State with Alabama and Kentucky visits scheduled, and then committed to K-State on the spot and canceled those visits. Austin Alexander is a kid right in the heart of Big 10 country, who had visits lined up to Illinois, to Iowa. He had Michigan interest, all that lined up. He committed on site to KU, or a day after his visit ended. Today, he committed to KU. That is a big freaking deal for Lance Leipold's group. Also this weekend, committing to the Jayhawks, they landed a commitment from 3-star lineman Harrison Utley, who is actually from Norman. He's an Oklahoma kid, but he's been pretty much known he was going to commit for a while now. Also, Ja'Cory Stewart, who is a linebacker from Alpharetta, Georgia. He is not ranked as of yet. Our guy Michael Swain said he'll probably be a high 3-star, mid to high 3-star, 86 out of 100 grade when he gets graded sometime later on in the calendar year. That's a big weekend for KU. We talked about it with Michael last week that this was shaping up to be the biggest month recruiting-wise for this KU staff, and this weekend so far, the biggest weekend that the KU staff has had on the recruiting trail. No KU commitments yet for no state of Kansas commitments yet for the class of 2024. No KU is in a battle for a number of guys. Caden Massey from Linden being one of them. Michael Boganowski from Junction City, who was also on campus this weekend. But this is a big deal for KU. Top 50 class in the country right now. And again, to get a player who was at one point committed to Wisconsin, had multiple Big Ten visits lined up, to nail that down, that's got to feel really good if you're this staff to get a player like Austin Alexander. And granted, these guys have to enroll. They actually have to get to campus. KU basketball just went through that, right, with Chris Johnson. Sometimes guys don't make it to campus for one reason or another. But at least for now, you've got to feel pretty good about this.
Well, momentum on the recruiting trail is a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
When you get a player of that caliber, it tends to turn a lot of heads. It might make players who are considering offers from your school, who might have considered themselves to maybe be above the caliber of a team that's played in one bowl game since 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if you're getting that kind of player, maybe they're saying, well, hey, if they're getting a player that good, I could go play with a player like that, a couple other players of that caliber, and we could build something there. It really is a real thing on the recruiting trail. And it has been very rare, very few and far between to see Kansas building recruiting momentum in football. And I think that's exactly what they've done with the weekend that they put together, and Alexander being the cherry on the sundae today.
The 2024 class for KU, again, for now, shaping up to be pretty good. And a lot of guys who are just, it's not last resort guys. There were a lot of guys that KU recruited during the Weiss. Well, the Weiss era was all JUCO kids, which isn't necessarily a problem, but his recruiting was not good. But during the Beatty era, some of the Les Miles guys who, you got a 3-star recruit, but all of his other offers were from Southern Illinois and East Tennessee State. You weren't actually battling at the same weight class. Alexander is a win. You were going up against Big Ten schools. The quarterback for the 2024 class, name is Isaiah Marshall, 6 foot, very similar game actually to the quarterback KU has right now in Jalen Daniels. They have very similar games. He had Big Ten interest as well. KU is actually battling with other Power 5 programs at this point, which is a big deal. According to 24/7, KU right now has 6 guys in the top 1,000 in the country, which seems like, okay, 1,000 players. Yeah, big deal. Do you know how many high school football players there are in the country? There are a lot of them.
Yes.
Being in the top 1,000 when every program between walk-ons and scholarship guys has 100 players, that's pretty good. That's really good, in fact. They've got 6 in the top 1,000. The last time they did that was the year 2020. It's been 5 years, essentially, since they did that. By the way, the best player out of that recruiting class back in 2020, best player now that they've actually been on the field, was the 24th ranked player in a 28-man recruiting class. That was Jalen Daniels. So recruiting rankings don't always mean a whole lot.
Right.
Because Jalen Daniels might be in the NFL in 2024. There's a very real possibility of that. But to have momentum, to have positivity, to be able to show recruits locally and nationally, this was not a one-year thing. Going 6-7, getting to the Liberty Bowl, nearly winning that game, that was not a blip on the radar. We're actually building toward doing that or doing even better with regularity. That's a positive, and that shows in these recruiting rankings. So I wanted to make sure to get to that today, and we'll talk about it more with Michael tomorrow for Jayhawk Weekly. But that's a big deal to land 3 commits, including a 4-star kid from the Chicago suburbs after your first major official visit weekend of the year. That's a really big deal for KU, and hopefully it leads to only more positive things down the road as well, because there are a lot of kids coming to Lawrence over the next couple of weeks to take official visits with Lance Leipold and company. We've got to get to another break. On the other side of this timeout, Royals-Reds tonight. Do the Royals have a chance against a former Royal who happens to be very bad in Luke Weaver? We'll talk about him next on 580 Sports Talk. Coming up tonight, right here on 580 WIBW and FM 104.9, we've got Royals baseball, boys in blue taking on the Cincinnati Reds, the Redlegs, if you will, so we can get a nickname in for both teams. 7:10 first pitch, pregame at 6:30, following some 580 Sports Talk overtime right here on the sports voice of Kansas.
You know the story behind why they were referred to as the Redlegs for a period of time in the 1950s.
Because you didn't want to be called the Reds when Joseph McCarthy was breathing down your neck.
So from 1954 to 1958, they were the Redlegs.
Mm-hmm.
Very intentionally.
Yes. Better dead than red. I know that for sure. Zach Greinke pitching tonight for the Royals. He's been as good as anybody has been. It hasn't been great for Zach this season, but it's been pretty bad for everyone else. Luke Weaver is getting the start for the Reds tonight. Here is what maybe gives you a little bit of hope if you are a Royals fan and you are just a diehard. You feel like, I want this team to win, even though I know they suck, yada, yada, yada.
If you're Fulton.
Yeah, if you're Fulton, essentially. This is for Fulton specifically. We've told you about a website we use a lot called Baseball Savant, and how they have all sorts of advanced statistics that come from, among other things, the StatCast program that baseball uses. You hear that referenced on our show, on other baseball media, on broadcasts, all of that. And they have a pretty easy way, even if you don't know what a lot of the stats mean, they'll show it on a player's page, player's profile. And if the statistic shows up in red, that means they're good at this. If it shows up in white or a very light shade of a color, kind of mediocre. And if it shows up in blue of varying shades, that's bad. You do not want to be in dark blue. That means you're very bad. You're in like the first or second percentile of something in baseball. Not good. Luke Weaver's Baseball Savant profile has a lot of blue. A lot of it. He's giving up a bunch of hard hits. Teams are barreling up his pitches a bunch. He doesn't spin his curveballs very much. He doesn't have a whole lot of fastball velocity. He doesn't get a bunch of swings and misses. He doesn't walk many guys. One of the better pitchers in baseball in terms of not walking guys. Generally speaking, he has been quite bad this year. That's your one hope tonight if you're the Royals, is that Luke Weaver has kind of stunk and you'll be able to bat him around a little bit, maybe chase him, get some positive offensive momentum. Because right now, I would not want to pitch to this Reds lineup because they are slugging it, and Ellie De La Cruz looks like he might be the next big thing in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, Ellie De La Cruz's Baseball Savant page just says wowza and yo and things like that. Like
word?
That's what it says.
If you click on the search bar right now, before you even type anything in, the number one trending player is Ellie De La Cruz.
He hits the ball super hard, and he might be the fastest guy in the league.
He legged out a ground ball to the right side of the infield.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
He did. It was just like some cool Papa Bell stuff. Like, you can't even believe what you're seeing. And he's like 6'5". Like,
he's a giant.
He's this huge dude. And
switch hitter.
Great power. Some concerns about the strikeouts. He struck out a lot in the minor leagues, still put up awesome numbers. He struck out 10 times in 27 plate appearances. The more you strike out, the less you can get to the hard contact you need to hit all those awe-inspiring home runs and turn on the jets when you hit a ball in the gap. But fun player. And you get to see him up close and personal. If you're headed to the K tonight or any of the next 3 days, you're probably going to get to see him. And he's only 21 years old. There's a chance here that this is the kind of player that you tell your kids and your grandkids that you got to see when he was just a pup. That's pretty exciting. He instantly made the Reds like 10 times more interesting. I know they're
more fun.
Yeah. And I know they're turning it over to a youth movement, but I was never like, hey man, I got to check out these Spencer Steer at bats. And that's not a knock on Spencer Steer because he's having a nice year, but Ellie De La Cruz is like, the tools are must-see TV. Yeah. Like, if he puts it all together, it could be dazzling. And his first 6 games in the major leagues have been pretty dazzling. So look forward to see what he does and how Greinke pitches him tonight. That's going to be a lot of fun. What tricks does Greinke pull out of his bag against a kid like this who, again, crazy power, but a lot of swing and miss? How does Greinke pitch him? That's going to be a fascinating matchup to me.
So the strikeout number might not be as much of a worry for De La Cruz today. He's striking out 37% of the time in a very small sample size. Greinke's only striking 18% of batters faced out this year. He's not striking out a ton of guys. We know that. Did you see the story last week about Zach Greinke pitching to Joey Votto? Did you see that? It was going around on social media.
Yes.
So the quick form of the story is many years ago now, Zach Greinke and his pitching coach, I think he was when he was with the Dodgers, if I'm not mistaken. They were planning, how do we attack Joey Votto? And it was at the peak of Votto's powers. Really, Greinke was at his peak as well. And how do we attack this guy? And it was, man, you can't throw him anything outside of the zone because his eye is way too good. He's never going to chase it. If you put something in the zone, he's going to barrel it up. What do we do to attack Joey Votto? And Greinke essentially came to the conclusion, I'm going to throw him cement mixers. I'm going to hang sliders to him intentionally because he is so smart and has such a good eye. He's going to expect that ball is going to break outside. And I'm going to throw a pitch that just never breaks outside. So he throws a cement mixer slider, and Votto essentially thinks, what? Why did he throw that? And he just takes it. Greinke throws the exact same pitch on 0-1, and Votto again doesn't swing. 90% of major league players swing and hit that ball 450 feet. Joey Votto just looks at it like, what is he doing? And I don't actually know if I read how that at bat ended. I think Greinke got out of it, but essentially that's how Zach Greinke's brain works. Is people zig, people zag. I'm going to do something completely different than any of that, and it has worked, and it is why he is going to the Hall of Fame 5 years after he retires. Is he a first ballot Hall of Fame guy? You think
Votto?
Either of them, honestly. Votto should be. I don't like Joey Votto because he's been a Red, and I'm a Cubs fan. I think he might be one of the more underrated hitters in all of baseball in the last, honestly, my whole lifetime.
Yeah, he's kind of had Todd Helton's career, except without having to apologize for playing at Coors Field.
Yeah,
he might be a first ballot guy. He really might. Greinke, I think he belongs. I'm less certain about the first ballot, but I think he belongs.
That's fair. No, that's entirely fair. Joey Votto, for his career, by the way, I mean, he has not really performed in the last couple of years. This year, he's hitting 205. I mean, he's old. He's tailing off. He led all of Major League Baseball in on-base percentage 3 different times. In 2012, he had an on-base of 474. That is crazy. That's not even the year he won MVP. In fact, he finished 14th in MVP voting that year. He's just been such a solid player for so many years. I think he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. That'll be my take on the situation. We need to take one final time out, but we'll wrap things up with the final word after this right here on 580 Sports Talk. Fun day of 580 Sports Talk. If you missed any of it, head to the podcast version of the show over at our website, 580wibw.com. That's where you can check it all out. You can also go back and watch any of today's show on YouTube. Time for the final word. Dan, you and your Nuggets, the floor is yours.
Let's wrap it up tonight. Let's do this thing. It's been a long time coming. 47 years as a franchise, 33 years of my 36 on this earth since I could care about anything, the first thing I could care about was probably Denver Nuggets basketball. Let's end it tonight. Let's put the losses in 2009 and 2020 and Jamal's injury and Alex English breaking his thumb in 85 and all that. Let's put it behind us. Let's put 11 and 71 in 1998 behind us. Let's win this thing tonight.
Final word for me today, other than best of luck to Dan's Nuggets, as I think they're going to wrap it up tonight. I think it's going to be a pretty celebratory night. Huge weekend, though, for Kansas State basketball. I think Arthur Kaluma is as close to a perfect fit as you're going to get out of the transfer portal for what this roster is and what this roster for the Wildcats needs. They need a reliable guy who's proven he can play at the high major level. I think Kaluma is going to thrive when he has a little more focus on him, and I think he is just a great fit for the pieces around him already on this K-State roster. They're back into top 4 in the Big 12 consideration as far as I'm concerned. That does it for 580 Sports Talk today. We're back tomorrow from 3 until 6. For Dan Lucero, I'm Brendan Dworzinski. We will talk to you then. But first, coming up after the news, we've got some 580 Sports Talk overtime.